What is the rudest way that a guest desecrated the sanctity of your home? My grandfather's cousin was staying with us for a week. He has a bladder problem and would refuse to wear adult diapers. What followed was him leaving a trail of both number 1 and number 2 when he walked around the house. It didn't take too long for my mother to ask his son to take him back home. All I can say is that if you're leaving little trails behind you, it's time to get off your high horse and into some diapers. My cousin and her daughter, who has Down syndrome, were visiting and staying with me in my home. Her kid pooped in a quilt, and for some reason my cousin rolled it up and shoved it in the closet in the guest room without telling me. I discovered it after they left. It was rolled up pretty good, so I didn't smell it immediately. I only found it because my dog stood in front of the closet and barked non-stop until I came and found it. She was so offended by it and didn't stop barking until it was completely cleaned up. I called her and said, "I found the quilt from your bed rolled up with poop in the closet. What happened?" And she said, "Oh yeah, my daughter had an accident. Sorry." They drank half the $200 bottle of tequila I got my wife for her birthday. Then they filled it up with water so we wouldn't notice. My boyfriend invited a couple of guys over while I was at work because we only have a 1-bedroom apartment and I don't always enjoy sitting there watching the game with them. It was considerate. Anyways, he was asleep and they were gone when I got home since I work the 3rd shift. I noticed my new bathroom mat was discolored and assumed that it was from shoes and didn't closely observe. Anyways, I made him look at it with me when he got up because I was a bit angry since it was new. Upon further observation, we came to the conclusion that before leaving, his friend wiped number 2 all over my new mat. It turned out to be brown finger streaks across the whole thing. I threw that out immediately. The toilet paper was readily available, by the way. They are not allowed in the apartment anymore, and it's weird because they weren't on bad terms. They actually wanted to hang out again. Stole money from our engagement cards at our house during our engagement party. He got mixed in with the wrong crowd and wanted to impress them more than be our friend, I guess. Ugh, he tried to crawl into bed with me while I was asleep with my husband next to me. Creepy and rude. Bold, and completely wrong and bad into the bargain. My God, trying to cheat on your friend is one thing, doing it with him 1 foot away is taking it several levels higher. When a niece came in and immediately stood in front of the TV and changed the channel. She was around 15. There were several people watching it. Most of my friends' kids, aged 7 through 11, have this problem. I tell their parents every single time, this is unacceptable behavior for a civilized human being, and I figure it's better that their random aunt is a bit uppity about it, more than every other possible friend and mate that they meet for the rest of their lives thinking that they're a selfish jerk. I had a friend who used to jump onto furniture like lawn chairs and stuff. He claimed he wouldn't break it, but sometimes he did break stuff and he just complained that it's not his fault, but that the furniture was too fragile. "Sweetie, John's coming over. Hide all the furniture." So I was away for the weekend and my roommate had some friends over for drinks. Problem is, when he drinks, he often blacks out, which he did before ensuring all of his friends had left. In the morning, he discovers 2 friends stayed the night in my room. Not cool, but at least they didn't drink and drive, I guess. So I'm not initially enraged. But when I finally make it home, I discover blood that is very clearly from a combination period and doing the deed on my duvet cover. Not whoopsies started in the middle of the night puddle, but edge of the bed, on top, smeared around. And we're not party college kids, we're all mid-30s with real jobs and what one might assume is a little bit of respect. They are not welcome back. They let their child punch our brand new TV and laughed as he did it as if it were cute. These kind of people are just accidental parents. I knew one such mum when I was a kid. Her kid literally punched me on the nose in the party, and all she did was sit and stare while someone else's mum had to come rushing in to save the day. Well, that's what my mum told me. Apparently she was like this everywhere, and eventually everyone just stopped inviting her, as she seemed to have no interest in even the slightest bit of parenting. They used my laptop to watch naughty movies, and it ended up with a ton of viruses. Then took a big dump and put almost a whole roll of loo paper into the toilet. Told my nephew his friend was never allowed back. They stole $70, shot up some crystal in my bathroom, dropped lit cigarettes on my carpet, and tried to justify it by saying, "They cleaned my sink." I had a house guest, invited by a roommate, have a psychotic breakdown. He literally came into all of our rooms, rummaged through our drawers, and left any contraceptives or bedroom toys on top of the dresser or nightstand as if to announce that he'd gone through it all. Johnnies, lubricant, birth control pills, all of those. He found ways to undress himself and walked in on my roommates doing the deed. We kicked him out inside of 48 hours. It should have been sooner. We then changed the locks. We actually all knew this guy and hosted him before, and he was great. We were cleaning house a few months later and found a bag of his curly hairs. Ugh. My 10-year-old distant cousin unwrapped 3 new bars of soap and flushed them down the toilet on the 3rd floor of my house. That night, we turned from dinner to find water dripping from the ceiling on the 1st floor. The 3rd floor bathroom had flooded and the water leaked through the floor, dripped from the ceiling on the 2nd floor, and leaked through to the ceiling on the 1st floor. The whole mess cost thousands of dollars to repair. The kid confessed everything with great glee, and his mother just thought it was the funniest thing. We had 2 couples come in to stay with us from overseas, and one of the couples spent the entire time arguing and getting into massive fights. This included screaming, crying, slamming doors, sulking, the works. For 3 weeks. It was the longest 3 weeks of my life. My friend and her boyfriend came to stay with me once, and they did this the whole time too, and I mean, they fought over everything. I think my favorite part is when her boyfriend started crying hysterically and locked himself in the bedroom because he slipped and fell when he got out of the pool, and my friend didn't comfort him enough. My mum welcomed a faraway cousin or someone into our house. He walked into the kitchen where my dad was sitting watching TV and said, "Who the F is this?" I had a party at my house one time, and some guy was being a sack of crap, so I told him to tone it down. He asked me, "Who the frick are you?" And I told him, "You're in my house. Who the frick are you?" Oh, I forgot this one. A friend of a relative stayed with my parents for a week. The guy was Argentinian, late 50s. He was very old-fashioned, religious and stuff. For example, he even told my parents that it was wrong that I was living with my boyfriend without being married. One day, he asked my mum to use her PC to check his email. He was in there for quite a while. Right. You guessed it, he was watching smut. But I guess he didn't remember the website he wanted, because he first Googled in Spanish, "young ladies with dark hair having relations," and a few variations of that. My mum found all of that in her internet history, called him out. He tried to blame my then 16-year-old brother, who had his own PC and speaks mostly English, wouldn't have Googled in Spanish. Add to the fact that said brother was away on a camping trip. He wasn't welcomed back. My ex-girlfriend got absurdly drunk at my grandmother's funeral and then got into a screaming match with my brother and dad in the front yard. Male friend asked that my partner and I take ourselves and our under 12-month-old daughter to a motel for a night whilst he uses our house to try his luck with one of our female friends we invited for game night. I had a collection of $1 casino chips, one from every casino I'd been to. A housemate invites some people over, and a guy sees them sitting somewhere and just starts playing with them. I figure the guy likes to fidget, so it's no big deal. He ended up taking a bunch of mismatched casino chips, and apparently even tried buying a drink at the bar with them. Luckily, one of the other guys he went out with got them back to me, but seriously, who does that? I had people over at my apartment, and somebody's friend upper-decked my toilet. Oh boy. If you don't know what upper decking is, Google it, but steady your stomachs and don't image search because it involves number 2. In any case, this is a bad thing to do, but how bad determines whether you're a student at a party. For that, it's probably borderline par for the course if you're in a frat or something. Gross, and I hate it, but one of the ups and downs of college or university life. It's wild if you're over 30. I was babysitting my neighbor's daughter. My neighbor was supposed to pick up the girl hours before and didn't answer any of my messages prior. I got the living room ready just in case she was going to stay the night. It was close to midnight and he finally comes to pick her up. The dad rang the bell and when I answered the door, he was so wasted. He barged in and walked past me to go to the kitchen, and everything that was in his grasp he literally destroyed. He went to the fridge and drank juice straight from the carton. He then walked back to the living room where his daughter was and shouted random crap at her, and mid-sentence he threw up all over my couch and passed out. For those of you asking, yes, he did apologize and pay to clean the couch. The daughter at the time had just started 1st grade, so she was probably 6 or 7. She's very smart, so she was definitely aware of what was going on. And did I call CPS? Yes. He turned out to be an alcoholic, and it wasn't the first time he had done that. This was in my car rather than my house. I don't have many rules for passengers when I'm driving, but there are 2 I will never budge on. First, wear your seatbelt. Second, don't smoke in my car. I just bought the car. It wasn't brand new, but I knew the previous and only owner, and I knew he was a car guy who took meticulous care of his cars inside and out. He wouldn't even sell me the car before he had given the engine a proper service. Within a week of getting the car, a friend asked for a lift to the train station. I knew he smoked, so as we walked to the car, I told him specifically to wait until we get to the station before he lights up, a 10-minute ride at most. I back out of the parking spot, drive to the exit of the parking lot, and as I check my left-hand side for oncoming cars, I hear from my right the distinctive sound of a lighter sparking up. The guy couldn't even frickin' wait until we were out at the frickin' car park before he just had to have his goddamn cigarette. I asked him what the hell he thought he was doing, and he just looked at me and says, "Relax, it's not like it's a new car." Motherfricker ended up walking to the train station. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. She let her dog, who was on a leash, pee on me and continued talking to finish her thought before taking him outside. She also didn't help clean it up. And you didn't interrupt with, "What the frick is wrong with you?" Based on some of these answers, a lot of people would watch their entire family be tortured to death without saying a word. I was going to post about a time I was really angered by friends of friends staying and emptying our fully stocked bar fridge and then emptying the wine fridge, which was also stocked, and a random bottle of Bailey's. None of these things go together. Heathens. They didn't offer to replace any of it, and made themselves completely at home and even invited guests over to view, quote, their place. But in reading some of these others, I'm starting to feel much better that no substances were involved. Maybe it's time for me to let that grudge up. My really close friend bought his now ex-girlfriend that was super controlling over, while me and a few other friends were hanging out. About 30 minutes in, she decided that she's going to go into my super white bathroom and dye her hair black. Not only this, but if you've never dyed your hair before, you must rinse your hair out to get excess dye out. She ended up staining my white counters, bathtub, shower, floor, 2 decorative bowls, my carpet outside the bathroom, and my toilet. I was just so irate, and I don't think she understood that you don't do this crap in someone else's house without asking them. Literally everyone that was over, including me, told her to get her now just showered, undressed butt out of my house. I was so done because she just stained so much stuff that won't come out easy. It makes my blood boil thinking about it now. A few friends and I were having some drinks last summer when a guy we know showed up at my house uninvited with a friend of his who was so drunk he immediately passed out on my couch. This now sleeping guy drove both of them to my house. Ugh. The guy continues to get plastered and do some smack, complained about the music we were listening to, and kept trying to put his own terrible punk band on. He cornered my wife and demanded she change her shirt because he has beef with the singer in the band on her shirt, and refused to sit in anything other than a broken chair that we had put in another room when he went to the bathroom. Then complained when it was 6 a.m. and we said we were going to bed, angrily waking his drunk friend up and saying, "I guess we're getting kicked out." Then they both left in the drunk dude's car. They stole $100, but the story has a happy ending. When I was young, I had 3 friends over, all of them brothers. The oldest was my age, the middle was a couple of years younger, same age as my brother, and they'd brought their youngest brother with them. He was a little beehole. Well, that day my dad let me hang on to a $100 bill because I thought it was cool and had never seen one. I showed it off to my friends and left it on my side table. I didn't even notice it go missing. Well, here's how the story goes. My friends had left, and when they got near their house, the youngest brother pulled out the $100 and said, "Hey guys, look what I took." The 2 older brothers got mad. They dragged him crying all the way back to my house, handed me the $100 that I hadn't even realized was missing, and forced him to apologize. Friends of integrity right there. My guests told their children, ages 4 and 8, that they could put their feet with their shoes up on our furniture. The justification was that we let our dogs get on the furniture, and my husband told them no feet on our furniture previously, and this had teed the parent off. Yes, my dog outranks you and your kids. Get over it. They picked up my very small poodle, held her on her back with 2 hands over a 10-foot balcony. If my dog would have even wriggled, she would have fallen to her death. My buddy came down for a week, and I offered to let him stay at our house so that he didn't have to pay for a hotel, much to my wife's dismay. I told her it would be no big deal, but boy was I wrong. At dinner the second night, he spilled beer all over my carpet, and his only pair of pants. Seriously, what grown man only brings 1 pair of pants on a trip? So I lent him a pair of pants to wear while his are in the washing machine, and that night he got so drunk that he peed all over himself and my couch. And to top it off, after he left in shame, I found my equally soaked pants that I'd let him wear stuffed under the couch. Maybe the guy wasn't doing so well financially for all I know, but when you cause that much damage, you really have to own up, and if you're able, pay for whatever cleaning needs to be done. Accountability, folks. You'll be embarrassed, but it cuts off about 90% of the future shame and judgment if you own up to it. I had a friend visit once, was in the area on the way to something else. I had a ferret at the time. Ferrets tend to bite. I always warn people. He bit her under the arm and she grabbed him and threw him to the ground. I reacted calmly but tell her off to some degree, and she then asks if she can take him to show some other friends she's meeting up with. Like, what the hell is wrong with people? You just showed me you can't even handle him in the house. You think I'm going to let you take him out in public? We had a party at our house. The guests ended up using the bathroom in our bedroom as well because of lines to the guest toilet. We've had one of those only attached to the wall and no legs to support sinks on top of a long, slim shelf kind of thing. A guest sits on the damn thing and broke it. I was beyond belief at how someone could sit on something that looks, feels, and very obviously shows it's not made to carry weight and is not supported. We now have one with legs. When I was living with my ex, who was an alcoholic and had a lot of mental issues, one of his friends from his past asked to stay over for a day or two. They drank. Like, a lot. I woke up in the middle of the night with the friend standing in our bedroom peeing against the bedroom window. When I woke up my ex, he didn't think it was that big of a deal. That's the day I packed my stuff and left. Kid tried to cut my birthday cake and open my presents. The kid was 8 and I was 6. The whole time his mum was laughing like it was some joke. I was frickin' mad. I looked at the mum and she was like, "Oh, Jonathan, don't do that, sweetie." And this frickin' kid kept going. I grabbed him and the mother effer was fighting me to open my presents. I'm not even exaggerating. He just had to see what was inside. He then tried to cut my cake and told his mum to get the knife because he was ready to cut the cake. What annoyed me the most was that none of the parents did anything. My mum was in the kitchen, so she couldn't see what was happening. They all just sat there watching it happen. It was only after I was like, "F this, I'm done, I don't care anymore, it's ruined," did my aunt do something. She didn't see it happening earlier either because she was helping my mum. Mum's cousin visited with a friend. Cousin and friend were early 20s, old enough to be decent house guests. Mum ordered takeaway for the adults and put fish fingers and chips in the oven for us kids. Before the takeaway turned up, the guests decided they were hungry and ate the fish fingers without telling anyone. Mum opened the oven to find a tray of chips and an empty tray where the fish fingers would have been, and had to put on more so that the kids wouldn't go hungry. It seems small now, but who the heck eats a child's dinner when theirs is less than 10 minutes away? A friend of mine demanded that my dad give her his iPhone charger. Not to borrow, to keep. He politely declined and she huffed out, muttering about how he was too old for an iPhone anyway. He was 49 at the time. She now wonders why he doesn't talk to her. Came over for lunch, assumed they'd be spending the night at my place, and got mad when I told them that the invitation was for lunch only. Ah, family. Not in my house, but my uncle's. My brother and his now ex-girlfriend were over at my uncle's house watching a movie. From what I was told, my brother had his girlfriend laying down on his lap and he was plucking her armpit hair out and putting it on the couch. Not frickin' flushing the goddamn toilet. Insisted on making dinner, burned the steaks. Insisted on making hamburgers. I told him I didn't like onions, so made the hamburgers with chunks of onions. I tried to eat one, but chunks of raw onions is not something I want to eat. He made beans in a crock pot but didn't refrigerate them overnight, just left them out in the crock pot, plugged it in the next morning and let them cook all day the second day. Claimed if there was any bacteria in there, cooking killed it all. Repeated for a week. My spouse and I ate the beans the first night and refused any leftovers. We had record heat for days on end, so we ran the air conditioning. He would not quite shut the door to the outside, leaving a small crack to let the cool air out and his smoking in. Every time I passed by, I'd shut the door until it latched. And worse, we had indoor-only cats and they'd occasionally escape because he couldn't understand that the door needed to stay shut. He left open potato chip bags in the pantry, and it wasn't any one thing, although food poisoning and endangering the cats was pretty close, it was the conglomeration of a lot of little things. This girl I hadn't seen in years showing up to my parents' house unannounced. I was so happy to see her, so she came home with me and we ate dinner and caught up on life. She stayed the night since it's so late, and the next day she confessed she was just released from jail and had nowhere to go. We tried getting rid of her for weeks. Then one day we stopped in Walgreens for something and she stole stuff. After that, my grandpa told her to offer favors to a trucker if she had to, but she was leaving no matter what. I dropped her off at the train station, and she called me 20 minutes later, but I refused to answer. Haven't heard from her since. What jobs exist because the human race is completely stupid? Traffic police in Baltimore. I was there this summer and the gridlock was atrocious. People push their way into the intersection, the light turns red, and they're stuck there until the light is about to turn red in the opposite direction, at which point those people push their way into the intersection and the cycle perpetuates. During rush hour, they have police standing in the intersections, not to direct traffic though, simply to hold their hands up when the light turns red so people don't push their way into the intersection. Basically, a human has to stand in traffic for hours just to tell the drivers what the lights mean. It was unbelievable. Oh god, this reminds me of Atlanta. They have highway signs that tell you how many people have died so far that year in traffic accidents, and it is obscene. It was something like just under 1,000 people so far this year in August. And yet, everyone still drives like they're the only person on the road, so screw it. Why not watch YouTube on my phone, swerve between lanes with no advance warning, and tailgate like I'm trying to drive through the other car? It's freaking terrifying, and I was only there for 3 days, and now I never want to go back. Ever. Just knowing that there are people who treat 5 lanes of traffic like it's a gosh darn go-kart track makes me want to hurl. My job. Financial advisor. My advice to you? First, save money for retirement. At least 10% of what you earn gross in an IRA or employer-sponsored plan. Put it in growth mutual funds or ETFs and don't touch it until you're satisfied you have enough there to live on no more than 4 to 5% of the balance per year for the rest of your life. Don't consider individual stocks with this money. Second, establish a basic budget based on your post-retirement savings income and current expenses. Do not spend more than you bring in on a regular basis. 3. Save a little after-tax money from every paycheck in an FDIC-insured savings account. This is your emergency fund. Don't touch it if you're not in financial dire straits. 4. Once you have at least 3 months of expenses covered by that emergency account, keep saving the money but flow it into another investment vehicle, such as stocks, bonds, CDs, treasuries, real estate, precious metals, whatever you're comfortable with depending on your goals and risk tolerance that can at least hold value, if not grow it. This is your savings for home, car, vacation, and other major purchases. With the possible exceptions of purchasing a home or borrowing for an education that will actually pay for itself, don't take on debt. Pay off your credit cards monthly. Pay your bills on time. If you can't follow all of the above steps, take a hard look at your lifestyle. Either find a way to earn more money, spend less money, or both. Second jobs are sometimes necessary. Many people just need to eat out less, go to bars less, drive a cheaper car, or downgrade their living situation. Don't give in to trying to impress others or looking good on social media. Just do you. Hopefully, the microphone didn't pick up the narrator rapidly scribbling and taking down notes on this commenter's points. Thanks for writing in. I really don't think about any of these things enough, and I really should. The guys who install rubber padding around telephone and light poles so when we walk and text, we don't break our noses walking straight into them. I work in an aquarium, and we have what I can best describe as floor guides, which are just staff that interact with people and share interesting info about the exhibits. Realistically, while that is part of the job, the main reason for these people being out there is to tell people to keep their hands out of the stingray and turtle tanks, because for some reason beyond my comprehension, people just don't naturally get this concept. At least once per day I hear, well, why can't I touch the stingrays? And so far, my all-time favorite outcome of that question was a kid who said, they have the word sting in their name. I've wanted to say that so many times, but I'm unable. And yes, I know that stingrays are relatively harmless and won't sting unless they're in fear of their lives and have no escape. They want to run away before all else and are actually quite friendly. That being said, it isn't that we don't trust the rays, we just don't trust the people. Also, we do have a touch tank with rays in it, but it's curated and the barbs on those rays are trimmed regularly as a further precaution. At my university, we have a person whose job is to stand by the garbage area and make sure people dispose of their trash appropriately. My school had a massive issue with recycling getting contaminated. It got so bad at one point that the company refused to take their recycling for a few months. They decided to redesign all of the bins to make it super clear what you can and can't recycle, and the recycling bins are always next to a trash can, so it's never more work to recycle. People still throw food and trash in the recycling bins and vice versa. On crowded nights, Disney Springs has employees working at crosswalks at the intersections from the overflow parking lots to tell people when they can cross. They're normal intersections that have lights telling you when you can cross. People just don't acknowledge them and will try to run across incoming traffic. Let's make a new ride. We'll call it Disney Springs Natural Selection Night. I met this one guy once. His job was putting dirt on potatoes. Somebody along the supply chain washed them pretty well by the time they got to the grocery store. People didn't trust the clean potatoes, so this guy had to put dirt back on them to make them more authentic. Somewhat related, continuously variable transmissions, or CVTs, are becoming more and more common in modern cars. CVTs have a virtually infinite number of gear ratios compared to the normal 5 to 7 speed automatics. In a normal automatic, you can feel the gear shift, but with a CVT, there are no shifts to feel as it smoothly moves between ratios. People complain that they think something's wrong when they notice there are no gear shifts. Because of this, engineers program the CVT to only use several specific ratios to recreate the feeling of the shift, defeating the purpose of the CVT. I'm a self-serve gas station attendant. Honestly, the only reason I'm here is to slap the emergency stop button if or when someone starts pumping gas outside their car or gas can. Oh, and to shut off the pumps when I leave. Did you ever have to tell a motorcycle gang member, it was a pagan in my case, legendary for their violence, that he couldn't smoke while pumping gas? I did. I thought long and hard about the wisdom of that and came to the conclusion that next time I was going to grab a bag of popcorn and watch the show from my booth in complete safety. The companies that get you out of timeshares. The worst part is that most of those are absolute scams as well. Broad answer to questions and comments I'm getting about this, though. Timeshares aren't scams for the most part. It's just a very different way of travel and doesn't work for everyone. Not all resales are bad. It just happens to be another industry that has more than its fair share of scammers. Be extremely cautious with resale and do your homework. My source? I worked in operations management for timeshare companies for about a decade. My husband is a labor and employment attorney for a massive company and gives monthly seminars to everyone there not to send pics of their naughty bits or make repeated unwanted advances on one another. And like clockwork, someone in that room does it within a couple of weeks. Tier 1 IT support. Did you try turning it off and on again? Sure you did. Could you blow into the cable to make sure there's no dust in the connect? Oh, the cable was loose? How surprising. Have a nice day. My mother gets hacked every day through her dial-up. She refuses to upgrade because the constant connection means the hackers can't hack her more, apparently. They make her Facebook run slow. Dial-up. And why does she think she's being hacked? Because things run slowly a lot. One look at her desktop tells me everything I need to know. Everything she interacts with ends up there. She constantly complains about slow startup. If it's not on the desktop, she can't find it. But my favorite part? She always tells people she's a programmer because she used to use DOS. Also, apparently she's a computer expert because she took one class 20 years ago. She is the embodiment of her generation's relationship to computers. I have a side gig doing data entry. I earn $25 an hour copying and pasting stuff from a web page into an Excel spreadsheet while doing some light formatting. To answer a few repeat questions, I know the employer personally, which led to me picking up this work. It's not a lot of hours per week, but the extra money is definitely useful. It's difficult finding this kind of work. You won't find it looking for job ads. You need to approach companies that you feel would have a need for this kind of service. And yes, you could potentially get Excel to do it automatically, but this is how you code yourself out of a job. You could learn to do it to make your job easier, but just be careful to never let anyone know, and if they get suspicious, lie your gosh damn butt off. Or take the opposite route, publicize your creation, put it on your resume, and use it to take the job of the dumb mother fricker before you who never thought to do it. IT Service Help Desk. My job exists because of stupid, and let me give you a pro tip about computers. Computers don't break because they don't do what you tell them to. Computers break because they do exactly what you tell them to. Although the narrator is generally on the side of the IT workers in this great debate, I will note that there are very occasional cases of just straight-up hardware failure or decline. But yes, generally people input commands and then get angry when the commands are followed to the letter with robotic precision. Psychic detectives, because why trust a professional detective to be intuitive? I had a temp job in a posh department store a few years ago. The escalator going down from floor 2 to floor 1 had to be taken out to be replaced, which took a month. Despite the many notices and signs directing people to the lifts and stairs, a member of staff had to stand at the top of the closed escalator just to direct the public to the lifts and stairs. It broke people's brains, and it was worrying to see how many people tried to get past the barriers or get angry and shouty because there was no escalator. Like, holy crap, how did people cope before moving stairs were invented? I read the title as "Do Jobs Exist Because the Human Race is Completely Stupid?" and I had a deeply existential moment where I considered becoming a hermit. All of the, quote, jobs at multi-level marketing companies. Hey hun, look, I know we haven't talked since kindergarten, but I'm sorry you're duped into thinking that 9 to 5 grind for someone else is where it's at. But I'm my own boss. I set my own hours and I get paid every 10 seconds. Can you say that? Ka-ching! Why wait 2 weeks for a livable paycheck? You can join my team of #bossbabes, but I only have 2 spots open, so take this #opportunity while you can. Yeah, it's a lot of upfront cost, but invest in yourself, because you're worth it. I support my family by selling all-natural, crystal-based, arsenic-infused face scream, and even if you don't want to rock that mompreneur lifestyle, you should defs think about checking out our line of products. I've seen your pics. You could definitely use them, and definitely buy them from me. My garage is super full of scientifically unproven garbage, and my family and friends won't talk to me anymore. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Gossip column journalists and paparazzi. The specialist cleaners that they hire specifically to clean up places that have been used as crystal manufacturing labs. It's pretty sad to see how much of this industry is growing in Australia. Bouncers at bars and clubs. Drunk people can be the biggest idiots, and you need someone there that can handle them so they don't ruin other people's good times. I watched a drunk couple thrown out of a concert earlier this week for general obnoxiousness. I don't think enough people appreciate how much these kinds of jobs improve our experiences. I was a bouncer at a nightclub. Don't have to deal with that many aggressive people, just drunk slobs usually. Had a girl once come to me sobbing because she couldn't find the exit that was 2 meters to my right, with a huge green exit sign just above it. Ticket companies that sell you tickets from ticket companies that sell you tickets. Fortnite coaches. Oh, they have coaches for League of Legends too. Oh, there were coaches for Halo 2 back in the day, and Halo 3. I remember seeing people ask for Microsoft points for an hour or 2 of coaching in Halo 3. Ugh, homeopaths. They're everywhere here in Germany, and insurance even pays for their treatments. It's ridiculous. Rag pickers and road garbage cleaners. My first job out of college was to stand outside of Aldi's and help people figure out how to put the quarter in the slot to release the shopping cart, and then later, how to put the chain back in to get their quarter back. I said, screw that. I stood there all day, baked out of my gourd. Gas pump attendant. Technical help desks. For me specifically, level 1 help desk. When I first started out in IT, so many of the issues users had were essentially 10 seconds of Google foo on our end to fix. Now, when you get to level 2 and above is where the paid pros really come in, even if it's still a whole lot of Googling to find the answer. And I know it's a joke, but the whole "did you turn it off and back on" thing really does fix the issues in a lot of cases. A professor told me that in his experience, just doing that fixed probably between 50 to 60% of issues. Surely the correct answer is those poor people who have to write the warnings and disclaimers. I've got to say a lot of these other people are commenting and seem to be largely confusing jerks with stupid. There are a lot of jobs that deal with people being jerks. That doesn't make them stupid, just jerks. I mean, kinda true, but a lot of the time the reason they are buttheads is because they're too stupid, oblivious, or ignorant of the effect their selfish actions can have on others. Televangelists. I hope I live to see the day people stop giving money to con men who buy McMansions and private jets and claim they deserve it because God loves them. It's easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than a rich man to go into heaven in the Bible, so they should be one of the few groups disliked by Christians and atheists alike. Safety officer. Common sense is not common. I work in an office alongside the health and safety team. I mostly answer phones and put track sheets into systems. We deal with utility work, and I genuinely once had a phone call complaining that the workers were rude to someone. When I asked what they did, they told him off for moving the safety barriers out of his way. The safety barriers that were around the hole they'd just dug and instead of crossing the road or walking around, this grown adult decided to move the barriers out of the way and walk through the site. I had to explain to him for the second time why it was dangerous to do so. Yep, people really will get angry that someone told them not to do something that could potentially cause them serious harm. And the narrator is willing to bet that this same person came away from the phone call angry that they hadn't gotten an apology rather than having learned anything. In Great America, there was and is a whole campaign where designers, marketers, PR staff, mascots, and whatnot were organized to create a bear with a hat to teach people not to set fire to forests. Well, it wasn't about not setting forest fires in the way you're making it sound. It was to make people more aware if they dropped lit cigarette butts or lit fireworks in grassy areas and made sure campfires and grills were out when leaving the area. Classroom support. I'm specifically thinking about my current engineering classes, where an electrical engineering professor preaches problem-solving skills above all until he's confounded by a projector. I'm an attorney. 90% of our work is spent on 10% of our clients. Then they blame us for getting in trouble after doing what we told them not to do. Basically, stupid people keep us employed. Stop breaking the law, idiots. Those parking guides at the Disney World parking lot. It takes a team of 10 people just to make sure we all park correctly, an activity we all do multiple times a day. I did this job for a year at Disney. I mean, it's definitely a needed service. People really lose their minds when they get to Disney. So many cars left running with doors open, which people had abandoned to get to the gate quicker. Man, I loved those. There's no guesswork and I didn't have to choose the perfect spot. They made me park next to a truck I wouldn't have considered before. While we can do it all ourselves, you end up with a lot less parking lot efficiency cruising up and down, blocking traffic while you do it, trying to find that one empty spot. I felt like a princess when they just gave me a spot and waved me in there. The only thing that could have made me feel more VIP is if they brought me in on a palanquin. Slaughterhouse workers. Are you kidding? Meat is necessary in our diet. I'm just kidding, it's absolutely not. Go plant-based today. Computer repair for the most part. Probably half of all the things I had to repair were extremely silly mistakes that could have been avoided by simply reading. Whenever people get an error message, they panic and click it away. Most don't even read it, when reading it could already help you fix it. I remember one guy who said he didn't want to pay us to put a SIM card in his phone, and I completely understood this because it's overpriced as heck. But we still told him to make sure to take the nano SIM out of the holder it came in order for it to fit in his phone. 10 minutes later, he came back because he'd ruined his phone trying to forcefully push the SIM card and the holder into the socket of his phone. If you really think about it, probably like 50% of the workforce. I'm an engineer and most of my day is spent fixing mistakes, designing things so they work even if the operator is a monkey, and doing things for other people because they can't figure out how. I used to be an emergency dispatcher. 90% of the calls were because people were stupid. Environmental lobbyists. We're going to go extinct because there are rich and powerful people who think they can save themselves from this cataclysm they've been cooking. Managers. I ran a department of 35 developers for many years, and I was keenly aware that all I basically did was ferry information from one person to another. Priorities from execs to developers, risks from developers to execs, dates, schedules, stuff like that. I was an information processing system. I remember thinking, and if Bob would just remember to tell Alice what she needs to know, I wouldn't be needed. But they can't, so that's why I get paid this insane salary. Mechanic checking in. 80% of the crap that rolls or gets flatbedded to the shop is because people who own cars are stupid. 20% because the engineers who design the crap the way they do are stupid as well. Televangelists. Just send us your money. We need that new jet. As a doctor in the US, I'd say at least half of the diseases I see on a daily basis are due to stupid decision-making. In fact, probably 75% of the cardiac and 90% of the pulmonary floors would probably be empty if people didn't smoke. And these days, it's becoming very common to see obesity hypoventilation syndrome, i.e. too fat to breathe. People that were paid to write horoscopes. Okay, I have an answer that's legitimately related to us stupidly losing a valuable form of communication. I work in a music school as a piano accompanist. I play for a lot of kids' voice lessons who are training for a professional music career, but solidly half of them don't know how to read sheet music. So the other portion of my job involves making recordings of their sheet music for them so they have some kind of clue what the frick is going on. We rely on recordings for everything, so reading sheet music is a fast dying skill. This leaves those poor kids completely unprepared for the real world, where they'll not always have a pianist who can read their music for them. Many of them come back to visit us and say, "Wow, having pianists in undergrad to help us was really helpful." And I feel terrible that I'm basically a crutch to help them get through school. Slot machine attendant. If people could do math, nobody would play slots. Well, I don't know. I think most people have heard of the astronomically low odds of ever winning one of those things, but for some, it's because it's fun and just due to an addictive personality and the way those things wow us. And now I'm remembering at least one other video I've done on casinos where people legitimately won at the machines and just didn't care. They just wanted the chemical sensation after they put in that coin and the bright lights flashed in front of their eyes again. Have you ever heard of the position customer service representative? A better title is unappreciative business meat shield, or perhaps ignorant customer chew toy. Now, some big businesses more or less make their customer service arm into basement-dwelling sub-lawyers who spout fine-print policies nobody knows about, but invariably involve jerking you, the customer, over. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the companies who pay people to kindly smooth over issues and solve problems that don't really have a department that can provide an answer. Hint, that's all the problems. Let's look at the freight industry where I work. Freight is simple. We are picking things up, moving them somewhere, and setting them down. Where it gets stupid are the expectations of customers who don't really give a crap and just want their stuff right now. I remember when we were in the middle of a blizzard where our terminal was located and we were understaffed due to, a blizzard and people getting stuck on the road. Trucks were going off the road and being blown over. But never mind that. Where's my stuff? One of our customer service reps was calmly explaining, as other lines rung off the hook, to an irate rural customer that we were in the middle of a blizzard and could not justify sending a truck out to the boondocks. The response? "It ain't snowing out my window." My other favorite is when customers call in and think the driver who picks up their freight is the exact same guy who's going to deliver the freight across the country. Like, this guy wakes up at 6, brings a whole 54-foot trailer to your business, picks up your single skid of absolute horse crap, and is then going to soldier forward to the coast to deliver it immediately after? It's our going policy to keep this Disney World illusion for our customers. Freight is actually a really difficult industry to understand, and it just isn't worth the time to explain it to a customer who realize mid-explanation that all they really care about is when their freight will get there. Thus, yes, indeed, the freight industry is driven by basically Santa Claus-like powers. Customer service at honest, hardworking companies is here to manage your stupidity and to make you feel smart and satisfied about it. What happened when you had to choose between your partner or your pet? Oh, this is my favorite story from when I worked in a shelter. A guy came in to surrender his cat, with the reason being that his girlfriend didn't like her. He started filling out the paperwork, but partway through he just stopped and said, "You know what? Screw this. I'm going to break up with her instead." He picks up the cat and walks out the door, presumably to leave his girlfriend. I hope he stuck to it and that he and his cat got a happy ending. This was a long time ago, but I'd just started dating this person and I was told they hated my dog. It was a bit of a shock, but I was like, no biggie, just get to know them and you'll fall in love with him. So the next day we had a doggy date and he tried to kick my dog. I literally grabbed my dog, turned around and walked away. That was that. She acted like she'd never even considered that I'd choose the cat over her. I don't think that thought had ever entered her mind. Then she went into a big spiel about how I'm a loser, I'm missing out, there's only one of her, all that crap. Yeah, I knew all of that when I put my foot down over her idiotic jealousy of the cat liking me more than her. The cat is now 16 and still with me, happy in her senior years. There's been other women since her, ones that treated me a lot better than she did. It's a total win for both the cat and myself. Not directly relevant, but once we took in a dog whose human was asked to make this choice. Beautiful Weimaraner. The guy brought the dog out to our house, on a hill in the woods with acres to roam. Dogs absolutely love it out here. And we spent some time walking around letting the dog get used to the place and meet our other furry residents. We could tell it was really hard on both of them, and then he left. The next day, he kicked the woman out and came back for the dog. Happy ending all round, I'd say. My BFF's little brother got a rabbit this way. One of the BFF's co-workers was told, not asked, told by her boyfriend to get rid of her rabbit so he could have a dog. She complied and my BFF gave the rabbit to her little brother. Year goes by and the co-worker breaks up with the boyfriend. Little bro laughs in her face and said she had already broken that little bunny's heart once, she wasn't getting a second chance. Little bunny lived for 7 years with little bro before age took care of it. I have an elderly rat, going on 4 years, which is quite the feat for one of those. I've raised him since he was a baby with his brother, who passed away 2 winters ago. When we moved in with my in-laws over the summer, they didn't want me to bring my rat. I straight up told my partner that I'll live somewhere else for a while. We'd been living together for almost 3 years at that point, because my rat is my responsibility. He was very old and I was going to see him through to the end. They were a bit upset and accused me of choosing the rat over them, but I explained that he's an animal that relies on us. It worked out. I convinced my in-laws to let me bring him in, and we're all still kicking. He's on his last days, and I'm glad I'm here with him. He'll be buried with his brother when it's time. That's great. Rats really are very sweet when you aren't in a position where you're being plagued by the wild ones. I'd legitimately consider getting another one if I didn't have cats in my life, which I imagine is just a recipe for disaster. It really baffles me how some people don't understand how much a pet can mean to someone. I remember one of my dogs dying overnight before a school day at secondary school, and the teacher mouthed off to the class about me taking a day off for a pet's death. Not me, but my sister chose our cat over her boyfriend of 4 months. He was furious when she dumped him and called her an idiot for picking a, quote, dirty flea bag over him. The cat wasn't a dirty flea bag, he just hated pets and wanted to try and control my sister. I was relieved when she dumped him. I never got good vibes from that guy. Jesus, I can't imagine having the gall to demand any kind of lifestyle change after only 4 months of a relationship, let alone one as major as getting rid of a pet. Not my story, but my friend. His girlfriend forced him to choose between her or the dog, but that dog was a remaining memento from his deceased mother, and of course he instantly dumped his girlfriend. She went from face full with expectations to beet red full of shame and anger and smashed his house windows when she left. Not exactly what you asked for, but I knew a couple that had to break up because she was badly allergic to his elderly dog. They were both understanding of the situation, and there's no animosity. They ended up getting back together after the dog had passed away and are now very happy. For those asking, there was about a 2-year period between their breakup and reunion. She tries allergy treatments and they didn't work. No, he couldn't just leave his dog home alone all night and just spend time at her place. That dog eventually died of cancer and old age around 12 years old. Neither was upset at the other during the breakup. It was truly an NAH situation. I remember him saying my diabetic cat needed to go so he could get a dog. We weren't even living together. I looked him dead in the eyes and said, my cat will outlive this relationship. Considering she was really sick at the time he said it, it was unlikely. And I stormed off. We broke up 6 years ago and my cat is actually still going strong. Pro tip, if your cat is diabetic, they get hungry. We poke ours when she's eating because she's single-minded at that point. No issues. In fact, she comes running when she hears the needle box rustling because she knows it means food. My ex asked me if she thought my dog liked me or her more, and I said me. She got genuinely mad and told me I'm supposed to just lie to her. We didn't last long. Why would your dog like her better? That sounds like some entitlement. Not my partner, but my mum gave away my dog when I was going away on a trip visiting my sister when I was 18. She called me while I was away to explain my dad was going to leave her if she didn't rehome him. Fast forward several years later, my mum gave her cat to my 7-year-old daughter only to later take the cat back after getting mad at me for something. 2 years later, my daughter still cries over missing the cat. I went no contact with her immediately following that incident. I found out my girlfriend was hitting my dog when I wasn't around. I'd reach out my hand to pet him and he'd flinch. He'd also try to avoid her, and if he couldn't, he'd go submissive. I finally asked because he was in a corner and she approached him and raised her hand as if to hit him. I asked if she had been hitting him in the head, and she said yes, basically. She just used about 500 words to answer the yes or no question. So I left her, and she was unable to admit that was the reason. I guess answering the question of what happened to you guys with, oh, he found out I was secretly hurting his dog, might make for awkward conversations. True story, I'm paraphrasing, my friend had his girlfriend spend the night at his house. While he was making her breakfast, she began complaining about his nasty dog. My friend told her, you should stop the complaining, the dog lives here and you don't. They broke up a week later. I bred tarantulas professionally for a few years. Most were in a specially designed shed outside, but I had a few in the house. I was totally upfront with people when dating, and if it was a deal breaker, then no hard feelings. I dated this one guy for a few months, but we'd always go out or to his. I didn't really think much of it. Around month 4, he started getting annoyed, and one day straight up asked me how long it was going to take to, quote, sell a few spiders. I thought he was talking about my actual job, so I was like, oh, I sell them in bulk to a supplier. He's coming round on Tuesday, actually. And my boyfriend was so relieved, but I couldn't really understand why. So the guy comes around on the Wednesday and sees the tarantulas in the house and goes on an absolute tirade about how I lied to him, how I've broken his trust, and how he's going to need time to heal. Not gonna lie, I just burst out laughing and I was like, "You really thought I was going to give up my job for you?" Well, apparently that wasn't the reaction he expected. He stormed out, yelling about how I was such a dumb B-word for not realizing how great he was. Tried to crucify me on social media, but he just ended up looking like an idiot. Not me, but my sister was dating a guy who angrily accused her of loving her elderly cat more than him. She said she did. She had him for 14 years and they'd only been dating for about a month. I guess he wasn't expecting that because he kind of just shut up and left the house. As someone who recently got into keeping venomous reptiles, I'm sure this will be an issue at some point. Even non-venomous reptiles can be an issue. Several of my boyfriends have been afraid of snakes, and even more tarantulas, though usually they calm down when you see you aren't treating them like toys or being an idiot about them. Although the narrator is nearly completely on the side of the people who decided to keep their pets and not the crappy partners who made these demands, I do have to at least admit there are certain pets, like venomous reptiles, that would at least be in the negative section of a pros and cons list when I was working out whether to stay in a relationship. But then again, I'd likely just leave and not demand that they get rid of the poor things. I had an incredibly toxic boyfriend who at one point paid the fee for a rescue cat for my birthday. That cat really didn't like him. She wasn't aggressive, she was just skittish, and didn't want to be around him. We had gotten into a fight earlier that day about something unrelated, and he decided to start ranting about the cat and how he believed we should get rid of her, that she was a bad animal just because she was skittish. I mean, she was a rescue, and a very loving one at that if you let her come to you when she felt safe. He started to threaten to leave her at the Humane Society or get rid of her when I wasn't around, so I couldn't stop him. I told him to get out of my house and immediately broke up with him. Butters is still making quality biscuits at my side and loves to take naps with me. I dated a guy who told me he had convinced me to choose him over my cats. I broke up with him shortly after, mostly due to that. Was happily single, then my now husband comes along and says, "I've always wanted to be the husband of a crazy cat lady." Way to win a girl's heart, man. Was getting a divorce and the ex-wife demanded my dog or she'd take me to court over the house. I reluctantly gave him to her. She called me 5 days after taking possession of him. He was chewing everything of hers, peeing all over her and her new boyfriend's house. I got him back and he never did any of that to me. I still have him and he's 15 years old now. I knew my husband was the one because he didn't ask me to choose between him and my dog. I was living in Chicago, my husband was in New York, and we were dating long distance. About 2 weeks before husband was scheduled to come out to move in with me, I rescued a little miniature poodle from under a dumpster in my neighborhood. The dog was horribly matted, reeked of pee, and appeared to have suffered from blunt force trauma to the face, which was already partly healed. I took him to the vet and they told me he needed all but 2 teeth extracted and his jaw reset. I was a graduate student at the time and didn't have 2 coins to rub together, so I asked the vet if they could put the dog down. He was elderly and clearly in a lot of pain. I wouldn't have asked to do it lightly. A total stranger in the waiting room overheard this and offered to pay for the surgery on the condition I give the dog a loving home. Obviously, he got the surgery and came home with me the next day. I named him Leo, after Leopold Bloom, as I was writing a paper on Ulysses at the time. I let him sleep in the bed with me, and the rest is history. He seemed to understand that I was his savior. I've never seen a dog get so attached so fast. The guy loved me. 2 weeks later, my husband arrives and this little dog goes immediately into full Freudian murder mode. He fricking hates my husband. Like, sees red and tries to kill him every time we hold hands or hug each other. We think probably whoever hurt his face and abandoned him also hurt his previous mum. Anyway, this tiny dog with no teeth straight up tries to murder my 6'3", 260-pound professional mover boyfriend multiple times every day. My husband can't get up to pee in the night because the dog guards our door like a tiny, yappy, snarly sentinel. He never so much as mentions the idea of getting rid of the dog. In fact, he cares for the dog when I'm busy and covers half the vet bills. We got married 3 years after that, and Leo was at the wedding trying to kill my husband the whole time. When Leo finally passed at 17, he had terrible doggy dementia. He could never remember where he was or how to find me, and eventually we put him down when he started to wet his bed. But he never forgot that he wanted to kill my husband, and my husband never did anything but return equal love to the guy's hate. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. 2 friends of mine dated seriously years ago. The girl's cat had jealousy issues and peed on the guy's feet. The guy put the cat in the bathtub and peed on the cat. The relationship didn't last much longer than that. I had an old friend who chose her ex's dog over the ex. And though there was no choosing in the one isn't around anymore sense, my dog 1000% loves my husband more than he ever loved me. If I hadn't married my husband, pretty sure my dog would have given me an ultimatum. The dog chose me. I divorced my husband and his dog destroyed his house and sadly wouldn't eat properly or do anything but stress until he came to live with me and my dog. But to be fair, my ex is terrible at pets. He just kept him outside all day and night with no interaction. The dog is a Great Dane, and at the time it was me, my toddler, and my dog in a little townhouse. But we gladly took in the big guy over keeping him alone and miserable with his actual owner. I found out that my ex had been talking to her mum about putting my dog down while I was at work and just telling me she ran away or something. I was using her iPad when her mum texted her. Something about the text looked funny, so I opened up iMessage and read through the conversation. She was mad because I cancelled going out of town because my brother couldn't dog sit for a weekend over a year ago, and was upset that I walked my dog for about an hour after work every day and not doing stuff with her. Her white trash mum and her came up with this whole plan, and it seemed like something was going to happen in the near future. Before that moment, I would have never thought I could have violent feelings towards a woman, but now I know in my heart that there's a serious possibility I would have hurt her had she actually done that. So good thing I left her. True story, my ex told me, "I'm leaving," and I was all worried about our cats. Didn't want to lose them, didn't want to separate them. But they say, "Don't worry, I'm not taking the cats." Immediate relief. I have a 14-year-old calico that started as a family pet but bonded intensely with me. My husband was very sketched out by cats when we were dating. When things got serious and we talked about our future together, I told him point blank that she had been in my life longer and there was no way I could leave her behind. He started coming over more to spend more time with her. He'd watch My Cat from Hell and read about cat behaviors, needs, and introducing them to new environments. We moved her into his apartment for about 6 months and then drove halfway across the country with her. She's now the queen of our New York City apartment and can't seem to choose which of us she likes better. Well, he got jealous anytime I'd even pet the dogs in front of him. He started treating them terribly. Eventually, he told me that basically he knows I wouldn't get rid of them, but so long as they were around, our relationship would be negatively impacted and would deteriorate. Then we broke up. Imagine feeling threatened and jealous about your significant other of 14 years petting a dog. They're well-behaved, housebroken, with no behavioral issues, no financial burden, and honestly, they were low maintenance in the attention department too. That's when I noticed something was very off and went ahead and proved him right. I didn't get rid of my dogs, and I just started distancing myself. Yeah, I wish I had something more insightful to share about this video, but it's really just a 20 minutes reassurance that people who make these ridiculous demands about their spouse's beloved pets, just based off jealousy about the pet liking the other partner more or taking up their affection, really are just petty trash people. Grow up, get some self-worth, and look at your actions from the outside. I was in elementary school when my stepdad made a comment about getting rid of my cats. I told him that we'd had the cats longer than him and I liked them better. He looked at my mum to defend him and she told him she'd told him not to talk about my cats. One passed away at the age of 14 when I was in college and the other passed away at 19 after I'd graduated. He was never cuddly with them, but it was always nice after that one conversation. 20 plus years later, he has his own cat that adores him and hates my mum. When my ex-wife and I were first looking at getting an apartment together, she tried to talk me into getting rid of my dog, so we had more choices for an apartment. I told her I'd never get rid of him because he'd still be there when she left. She was mad, but she got over it. We got married, she got a dog because she was jealous of my bond with my dog, and she'd accused me of making her dog like me more and that I loved dogs more than her. When we divorced, I kept both dogs. When my ex and I split, she left me the cat that only liked me. Ignatius and I are doing great. I ended it before she gave me the ultimatum. I'd noticed that she'd get really annoyed with my dog some days. Well, we broke up once I noticed that my dog would never break my heart. God, do people really do this? I mean, I've had my dog for 12 years and I've known my wife for 4. For her to expect me to get rid of him would be insane. I've told my wife 100 times, if they were both hanging off a cliff and I could only save one of them, I'd save my wife, but I think there'd be a second's hesitation there first. To be fair, anyone giving you an ultimatum to choose between them and one of your loved ones, human or otherwise, isn't interested in a healthy relationship of any kind, and so isn't worth your time. Long story short, never choose the one giving the ultimatum. I personally didn't want any animals when I met my girl. She had 3 dogs, around 80 pounds each, that lived in her house. It really made me nervous about living together. I was never much of a domestic animal lover. I personally saw it as a waste of time and money. We've lived together for 3 years now. We have 5 dogs and they're the best part of my day. Never knew what I was missing out on. I've started seeing someone recently who loves her cats. I'm highly allergic and haven't mentioned it yet. We've only been on 3 dates. I'm afraid it's going to be a deal breaker. It's a shame as everything else is going really well so far. I had to get a restraining order. Too many men will make jokes about harming a cat because they don't like them. Both of the men who I've met personally who were violent about cats did get violent with me as well. I've heard many similar stories online. On our first date, my now husband was talking a big game about how he doesn't like cats and cats don't like him while we were hanging out in my apartment with my 2 cats. I said, well, they were here first, so don't even think you'll win that one. He wasn't asking me to choose, but I wanted to make damn sure he knew I wasn't going to deal with any sort of ultimatum. You can now catch him holding one of our 4 cats to the window and showing them interesting things outside or burying his face in their belly fluff. Who in the world would trust someone that dumped a pet? My dad gave away his dog because his wife said she was allergic. She wasn't, she just didn't like the dog. Oh my god, this is the only story where someone actually gave away the pet. I had a live-in boyfriend. We had been together a year and decided to cohabit because long-distance relationship wasn't fulfilling. I had a cat for 15 years. He didn't demand I get rid of my old man, but he repeatedly made comments about how it was time to PTS because my cat was old and thin. He always commented on my cat's weight. Even went so far as to stop by a vet and pick up a cremation pamphlet so I could shop for urns. I spent loads of money on all the senior blood work, checked his thyroid and stuff. He had a clean bill of health because I always provided him the best nutrition and care. One day I told him, the next time you mention me putting my cat to sleep or imply I'm not doing right by him, make sure your bags are packed. And he was gone 3 weeks after that. The cat had 3 more wonderful years before cancer got him, and I did PTS. People, 15 years of love and emotional investment will trump your new relationship every time. Lightly related, I had to talk my significant other into adopting a cat 8 years ago, and I vehemently convinced him. Sadie chose him the moment we got her. She latched onto him in the car and cuddles him every single day since. She kisses him to wake up and greets him at the door. She walks away when I enter the house and she sees it's not him. I'm lucky she even meows at me. She's cuddled me maybe 10 times in 8 years. I beg this cat that I fought so hard to get for attention. She's one of our favorite parts about our relationship. When did you lose your childhood innocence? When my buddy was in elementary school, his parents would take him to Toys R Us, where, if he was really good, he could choose one toy. He would peruse the entire store before making his important selection. On one such trip, he selects a 36-piece magic set. It's a bit costly, but his mum justifies it because he's been particularly good in the last week or so. On the way home in the car, he sits quietly grinning with his magic set in his lap and wonders how the kids at school will react once he reveals to them that he, in fact, knows magic. Upon arriving home from the toy store, my buddy races off upstairs to finally learn some magic. Keep in mind that he thinks he's on the verge of being a legitimate Harry Potter here. After about 20 minutes, he comes downstairs dragging the box behind him, walks up to his mum with his head hung quite low and asks her if it would be okay to take the magic set back to the store. His mother, concerned with the defeated look on her child's face, asks him, why? He looks up at her and very solemnly states, it's not real magic. It's just a bunch of tricks. When I was in about 1st or 2nd grade, I was an imaginative kid. My grade school was in front of a big wooded area in suburbia. At recess, I started telling my friend about the man who lived in the woods. Things like, oh, you see that tree stump? That's his stove. And that fallen over tree? That's where he set up his house. Similar thing to looking at the clouds and seeing dragons, you know? In my head, he was a Rip Van Winkle type of character. Pretty soon I had a bunch of friends who would come and listen while I talked about the man in the woods. This ended badly when one of the kids mentioned this to a teacher, and I ended up in several hours of interviews with the principal, teachers, and guidance counselors over whether there really was a creepy man in the woods hiding there, preying on the school's attendees, and whether I'd been mistreated by him. I'd never heard most of the things they were talking about. I kept saying it was just a game I made up, but they couldn't believe a kid would bother doing that purely for fun. That pretty much killed the innocence right there. You know what killed my childhood innocence? The bubble jets in the swimming pool. Those frickin' bubble jets in the swimming pool. Probably the time my father showed me his swollen testes after his hernia surgery. Thanks, Dad. I can't recall a specific moment, but the worst feeling is when you revisit a place that you have not seen since childhood, and it's smaller and less impressive than you remember. I think the biggest tragedy of growing up is that simple things no longer give me a sense of awe and fascination. I remember going back to my elementary school playground and seeing the jungle gym thing. It was a sort of hexagonal sort of cage that was so much fun to climb and hang and swing around on, lest you fell to your death from its incredible height. Except now the thing isn't even as tall as my shoulders. The incredibly tall slides that were feats of amazement to even be able to climb to the top of back when I was a kid, they're barely over my head now. So on and so forth, it was a mind-blowing experience at the time. Very true. The narrator was a small child in another country and only recently got to revisit some of the places he was raised in. It's pretty surreal seeing the familiar surroundings, but at half the size you remember them being when you were just an ankle-biter. Shortly after getting AOL access, I learned of a special chat room called GIFs, back in the days when you had to barter your way to adult movies. When I found out my dog hadn't really been sent to a farm in the country. Man, just growing up and realizing that life isn't all about Legos and Batman. Also, I discovered how to tickle my pickle. A bunch of illusions. A trick is something a working girl does for money. When I accidentally discovered the website of the 34th rule. When I learned how to delete my browsing history from my family's computer. When I was 18 and it was the end of my first real relationship, I'd never known pain like that and would never be the same. The heartbreak was so bad that I'd never thought I could be that close to someone again. It took years to get over. I saw people jumping from the World Trade Center on TV. I went home from school that day feeling pretty low. When they changed the voice of Ash on Pokémon. As a kid, I was given a magic kit. My dad says I opened it as soon as I could, then came home to him sobbing 10 minutes later because the wand didn't work. I also cried when I got the Jumanji board game and no crazy plants or animals jumped out of it after rolling the dice. Then on my 12th birthday, I burst into tears after waiting until 1 a.m. for an owl from Hogwarts. I was convinced I had to be a witch. I think by 14 I'd realized that crying wasn't going to open a portal to an alternate reality where my real king and queen fairy parents were. It's alright, my parents told me when I was about 11, about 3 hours into a 12-hour car ride, that I hadn't gotten my Hogwarts letter because I was a squib, and my 5-year-old brother had already shown signs of magic and was going to be a wizard. I cried hysterically in a ball in the backseat for the remaining 9 hours of the car ride. When I was placed in an orphanage, that kind of ruined my childhood. Also, green eggs and ham sucked. When that butthole in 5th grade called me fat. Whatever, I grew up and now I'm pretty good looking. I was 3 years old and I wanted an Oscar Mayer weenie whistle. Christmas came, there was no weenie whistle. In school, I noticed that a lot of kids have birthdays in August and September, and then I did some math and figured out it was approximately 9 months after Christmas vacations and New Year's Eve. You know, I don't think I ever lost mine, or had it. At least I don't remember it. I remember this intelligent, conscious state only, no early childhood. 7th and 8th grade, really. People started coming out, doing the deed, and I was in a lunch table where preverted jokes were the norm. When I heard Santa isn't real at the age of 46. I was on E outside a club and pretty drunk. I got separated from my friends and I found myself turning down the advances of some Middle Eastern guy who kept asking me to come back to his apartment for wine. I told him I wasn't gay and he just replied desperately, "Oh, none of that, just wine." I then realized he was holding his throbbing member in the open air and has got this really pained expression on his face. I ran and was never innocent again. The first time I realized that not only was the advice my father was giving me wrong, it actually hurt me more than helped. I had a rough time growing up because the kids at school picked on me constantly. My dad advised me to beat them up, thinking that what worked for him would work for me. And after all, my dad was the smartest guy ever. He couldn't be wrong. Well, I got suspended and the teasing became even worse. Turns out, beating them up is bad advice to give a tiny elementary school girl. It made me realize how culturally blind my dad was and to take all of his future advice with several grains of salt. I heard my dad fall down the stairs while he was carrying the Christmas presents to the tree when I was 7. I found out then and there that there was no such thing as Santa, the Easter Bunny, or the others. And my dad was fine, if you really need to know. Probably when I watched the Ren and Stimpy adult party cartoon. At the time, I was so frickin' excited for new episodes of Ren and Stimpy, and then they began doing it in the butt, which was a total curveball of what I was expecting. I knew it was going to be more mature, but I didn't know it was that adult. Probably when my dad and I went to pick up my best friend for baseball practice in 4th grade. He was hit by a truck when he was riding his bike minutes before we got there. Crap, dude, I'm 26 and I'm still the same happy-go-lucky, naive little jerk I was at 8, except with money. It's kind of fun. I think it was the summer before the start of my senior year of high school. I knew that I'd probably be working the following summers through college, so I took a moment to reflect on what was probably my last day of summer until retirement. I watched the sun set. Yeah, I was dumb enough that I didn't even entertain that the fun was over until high school had been done for like a month, and I realized that I should really be out sorting out whatever my life was going to be next, so well done to you for being smart. I repeated not getting my crap together as soon as I went back to university and spent most of the time just playing video games. As a child, I was kind of a loner. I had a few friends here and there, but didn't really get along with most of my classmates that well. I liked nerdy things like cards and video games and stuff. And man, I loved my Legos. Because of this, I was outrageously close to my grandfather. He was an amazing man. He had intelligence, charisma, charm, and a very powerful demeanor which I really looked up to. My parents both worked very late jobs, so instead of staying up at the empty school till like 6:30 at night, my grandfather would pick me up from school 3 times a week and take me to the local park and 7-Eleven for a Slurpee. In 4th grade, I got picked up after school like any other day. I was beaming with excitement to see my grandpa and go to the park with him. I'd been waiting all day, and I was bragging to my friends that I got to play with him so much. I ran out to his car to find my own dad was picking me up that day. Rather unusual, but I thought nothing of it. When I got to my grandpa's house, there were about 10 people sitting there, all crying and trying to hide themselves from me. My grandma pulled me aside and while sitting me on her lap, leaned in to whisper to me ever so casually, "Your grandfather has died, my son." It was like I could not comprehend her words. In one sentence, she completely split my insides in half. I could barely breathe, much less respond to what she was saying to me. I stared wide-eyed at the wall for about 10 minutes. I silently snuck out of the living room and made my way upstairs to his bedroom. I was terrified to let anyone see me trembling. I remember sitting in his bedroom where he'd hooked up an original NES for me. He and I would play video games all the time, way past my bedtime. I sat there replaying the same level of Mario over and over while I cried the entire night. That day I lost both my grandpa and my first true best friend. When I was 6, I woke up at 4 in the morning to find my mum on the phone crying and my dad on the floor having a heart attack. Most of that night was a blur, but I do remember waking up later that day to the whole family being at my house and my dad being noticeably absent. I was never really the same after that day. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Watched a man who drowned and got pulled out of the lake where we were swimming. I was about 11, and my friend and I were rowing out in our little inflatable boat over to all of the commotion, thinking that somebody had a huge fish and needed some help or something. Talk about disappointment. I watched Labyrinth. You know, that package? Yeah. My mother still won't allow Rainbow Chips Ahoy into the house because I threw the most epic fit when I found out there wasn't a party in every box. I just wanted to party. For context, I'm now 25 and live 8 hours away from home, and they're still not allowed. My dad showed me a sketch of his idea for an invention for air conditioning that needs no energy input. I told him about the first law of thermodynamics. I was 8, and he went all redneck dad on me. Mine was when my parents split up. I was 11. Before then, the idea that mums and dads could even do that had never entered my mind. After I understood they were only human and sometimes had conflicting needs, I grew up really fast, especially when my mum started dating again. A few of us were over at a friend's house. I was 13 at the time. He was an only child of a single mum. She left to go to work, and shortly after she was gone, one of our friends was like, "Is she gone for sure?" After getting a confirmation that the coast was clear, he pulls this VHS tape out of his backpack while giggling and hands it to the friend whose house we were at. He pops it in the player, and seconds later this full-on hardcore adult movie scene is playing on the TV set. I was literally dumbfounded, as I'd lived a pretty sheltered childhood, and now there I was, staring at this close-up shot of two people doing the deed. My other friends were laughing awkwardly, and I just sat there in shock, unable to take my eyes off that screen. In short, friend ambushed me with my first adult movie. I can tell you that the image did not leave my brain, and I learned to do something about what I was feeling the second I got home the next day. When I showed my cousin my stuff, and she refused to show me hers. We had a deal, man. I was somewhere between 3 and 4. My mother was cheating on my father and discussing this new man who was going to be my new dad. 9 months later, my brother was born, and it was pretty obvious he wasn't related to my dad. New dad never came up again. Nobody ever talked about why my brother looked so different from the rest of us. I remember when I was 8 years old, I asked my dad what a condominium was, because I'd seen the word on signs all around my neighborhood and on TV and whatnot. He didn't hear the inium part. Looking back, he manned up to the situation like a boss, but that still doesn't make my 8-year-old mind prepared for what he said next. Probably when I was 4 or 5 and my sister caught me vigorously thrusting against a life-size tiger stuffed animal and asked me in horror, "What are you doing?" All I knew was that it felt good. I didn't know what I was doing or why I did it yet. I suddenly realized that if it feels good, you shouldn't do it in front of other people, and that I should feel shame doing that where others may see me. A few days later, the leg of that stuffed animal fell off and all of his bean stuffing came pouring out. Poor tiger. Cause of death? My 5-year-old libido. I'd have to say when I was in like 4th grade and it was Valentine's Day. Everyone was giving each other all the bullcrap cardstock Valentine's stuff with maybe a lollipop taped to it, if their parents spent the extra money. I bought a heart full of candy for a girl I liked in class. She was my first crush. She saw it was from me and gave me the patented girl, ew, look, and I was later told that she threw it away. I was 7 years old. My parents said I had a sister named Sarah Connor who was unalived when I was younger. Then they made me watch The Terminator 15 minutes later. Marvelous. I can't wait till I have a child so I can pretend certain sci-fi films are actually factual documentaries. Darling, this is called Alien. This is why there are no more shuttle launches. As funny as this is as an abstract idea, you really shouldn't do this to your kids if anyone watching this is getting ideas. Creating trust issues and generally scaring your kid is pretty messed up. Also, I've saved some of the darker stuff for the end of this video, so trigger warnings for some pretty rough home situations involving children. I was about 15 feet away from a motorcycle crash that killed 2 people when I'd just turned 14. This was the summer before high school, and varsity tennis spent the summer practicing. Me and about 3 other freshmen picked to make varsity were practicing on the court right next to an interstate, the RT11. A teenager who'd fallen asleep at the wheel, it was 3 p.m., crossed into the oncoming lane of traffic, hitting a motorcycle carrying a man and his wife. There weren't any other cars around at the time, so the 4 of us ran across the interstate to a florist to have 911 dialed. My friend and I had both taken CPR and first aid training and foolishly thought we could help. I ended up just emptying my guts within 30 seconds of stumbling onto one of the rider's boots that had their foot still inside of it. Also, it didn't help when my friend pointed out that one of the helmets along the wreckage still had the head inside. When I was 11, my dad shot my dog in our backyard while I was still at school. My dad was a really messed up guy. So anyways, that afternoon as I was walking home from the bus stop, Dad drove up and got me, which was weird. Dad was drunk. When we got home, I discovered that the dog was gone. He told me Rusty had run away. I freaked out, ran barefoot through the backyard, and through some viscera, by the way. I grabbed a leash and went searching for my dog. Hours later, my mum found me walking the street, sobbing and calling for Rusty. My feet were raw and bloody. By then, I was suspicious that Dad had done something. I was furious. I took him out to the backyard, still oblivious to the brains that were scattered everywhere, and still barefoot, and yelled, "What the F did you do to my dog?" He just kind of smirked and told me it would be okay and went back inside. Later, my mum sent me up to bed. Dad was still drunk. My sister was already asleep in her room. I lay there furious and afraid for my poor Rusty. Unbeknownst to me, as I lay awake in bed, my mum and dad were having an epic power struggle downstairs, in which my dad produced another weapon after confessing that he had killed the dog. When I heard a commotion, I ran downstairs. Mum was in the kitchen and she shouted, "Margot, grab your sister and run. Grandma will pick you up." And so I did. I got my 8-year-old sister out of bed and we ran down the street. We were barefoot, and I can remember how my own feet sounded on the asphalt. I remember telling my sister to run faster. I don't think of that day as the day I lost my childlike innocence, because that had been worn away by the years of my father's behavior already. Rather, it was the day I became an adult. We were whisked away to my aunt's house later that night. I'd finally been told what happened. As my uncle and grandma got my sister all set up, my aunt took me into her bedroom and handed me a little red box. I opened it and she asked, "Do you know how to shoot?" Yes, I knew how to shoot. My dad had taught me. Good. You protect them if you have to. And don't worry folks, my mum survived. My dad drowned on a family vacation when I was 10. I was 13 and I had a job. My bank account tipped over the $1,000 mark for the first time ever, and I was beaming with pride holding my balance book, thinking of all the things I could buy. My dad looked over my shoulder and took my book and said, "Son, I think it's about time you started saving for your education." He wiped my account clean, it was in a trust, and put it into RESPs. I was so bitter about that. He probably did that another 5 times over the next 3 years and I hated him for it. That is, until I was able to pay cash for my first year of uni. That was my real first lesson in planning ahead. The opposite of this. When I asked my mum, who does most of the finances and has an MBA, what the plan was for paying for college, her response was, "It's freshman year, we have some money saved, don't worry about it." I really should have worried. The money ran out before the end of freshman year. I managed to pretty much pay my own way through 4 years of college with loans and a really nice surprise in the form of stock from one of my uncles, which my mother also got her hands into and helped me mismanage. 10K turned into about 6 or 7. So, what specifically shattered my innocence? The realization that I understood the current economic situation better than my parents, and that my mom was probably becoming senile. When I found naughty movies on the computer my grandfather gave me 2 days earlier, I literally had a, "I'm 12 and what is this?" moment. What? I started independently looking for that stuff at around 12. My moment came when my mom was in the next room holding a piece to her head with my stepdad egging her on to use it because her son, or me, doesn't love her. I opened that door as a 9-year-old kid, called him a butthole, and told her that I loved her. My mum and I are extremely close and have been ever since. And she divorced him and her boyfriend now is a complete opposite, an awesome guy. I was about 9 and went to a Catholic school where everyone had perfect 2-parent households, with stay-at-home mums who always made perfect lunches. One day we had a Muffins for Mums Day, where you would bring your mum to school with you and eat muffins. I bought my mum and we ate muffins. The next day was Donuts for Dads. I was the only kid sitting alone. Nobody talked to me during the festivities. I didn't even get a donut because I had failed to bring my dad with me. There were 2 extra donuts. I remember that it was a pink one with rainbow sparkles and a chocolate one. The teacher gave them to another kid in class. I was thinking, those are my donuts, for me and my dad. I left school that day and nobody noticed. I think from then on I became really withdrawn. I rarely showed up at school. My mum worked and I'd always been responsible for getting there myself. Things just generally sucked. I was picked on a lot for having an absent father after that day. You know, I think mine disappeared about the day I discovered the temporary internet files folder. It was like the sloppy seconds of internet smut. When did you realize you were being catfished? My ex-girlfriend tried catfishing me to test me. It took me about 30 seconds of looking through the profile before I realized that the name was her name backwards. The craziest thing is that she really thought it would work. That girl was bonkers. About 6 years ago, I found out my brother was a catfish. He had been catfishing this young man in the UK whilst being in America. He had fake pictures, a fake name, but his real phone number. The guy being catfished, we'll call him Lenny, would repeatedly call my brother and leave messages on our house phone. My brother and Lenny often sent each other packages of sweets. Lenny made the decision to come to America to visit since he's never been, and my brother agreed. On the day Lenny arrived in Texas, my brother told him the truth but never actually met up with Lenny. Lenny tried all week trying to convince my brother to meet him, telling him that he just wanted to know who he really was. My brother never showed up. Lenny called religiously every day for about a month trying to get my brother back. I think he really loved him. After that, I never heard from him again. In my sophomore year of college, my friend Kerry, a 19-year-old guy, met a girl named Kelly in a chat room. They talked a lot and got close. One day, Kelly revealed that her boyfriend broke her jaw. Kerry drove to a city a few hours away to rescue her and learned that Kelly was really Kenny. Kenny beat Kerry into giving up all of his passwords, then unalived him and left his body in a field. Then Kenny impersonated Kerry online for several days in an attempt to cover his tracks. He did a bad job and got caught and deleted himself in jail before trial. I realize how this all sounds with all the names beginning with K and ending with a Y, but it's a true story. You can Google it. It really messed me up for a while. So, when I was a freshman in high school, I was big into Neopets and had a clique I ran on the boards, and we chatted off-site as well. Two of these people were Shelby and Adam, same age as myself, more or less, and dating. Adam had a sister, Kelsey I think, who was also in the clique. Well, it came to pass, as internet relationships do, that Shelby and Adam broke up, and Adam and I started talking/dating. Shelby gave us her blessing. We shared pics. He was a typical emo-looking kid, which 14-year-old me loved. We talked on the phone, only once or twice. I was very shy about it, so I didn't mind the lack of voice communication. At one point, he sent me a YouTube video of him and his friends. There wasn't much talking and it was all pretty muffled, and it sounded like they were speaking German. Later, Adam and I broke up, and it was after that the big reveal came. There was no Adam. Kelsey had made him up and been posing as him all along. I asked Shelby about it, and apparently she had found out when they'd broken up too, but Kelsey had made her promise not to tell. Gee, thanks. In short, Neopets is good for clean fun, but not dating. Yep, being on the internet pretty much my entire life has taught me that if your online activity has a social function of any sort and gets to a certain size, people will use it to date. In many cases, more successfully than this, I might add. I have to say, I don't understand what the catfishers get out of any of this, but evidently it's something because so many people do it and keep doing it. I was talking to a girl I met on Tinder, and while I have on my profile that I'm not interested in being anyone's third, she kept talking about the guy she was currently seeing and how hot he was, and didn't I want to F him with her? I eventually found her Facebook and his was a real Facebook while hers consisted of two really fake-looking photos and no actual information. So it became apparent at that point it was the guy just trying to get bi girls to do stuff with him. Oh boy, this is going to be a fun story. I used to be on Omegle, a chat site, a few times when I was 17 or so. Everyone asked ASL, which means age, male or female, and location, and most of them would disconnect when you said you were male. So at one point, I told people I was female just to be able to talk to people. Anyway, I connected to a girl and we had a great time together. We chatted for 2 hours or so because I believe we gave each other our Skype addresses. I had to create mine in a quick hurry because I didn't have a fake girly Skype address that matched my fake name. We went on to chat almost every day just for fun, and even though I knew I was lying to her by being a girl, I still had some fun, but I felt really guilty for lying to her, and I knew we couldn't meet in real life, even though we lived close to each other. One day she confessed that she was lying to me about something. That thing turned out to be that she was a guy as well. We kept contact and we had a great time together still, and we actually met each other once. He died 2 years later though, but still, good times. Not me, but my father-in-law. He lost his wife 7 years ago, and after a while was tired of having an empty house and nobody to talk to. He tried online dating, but went to a free site and got hooked. A lady who claimed she lived in Chicago started chatting him up. She was an international traveler for business. She had pics and seemed friendly enough. They chatted for a few weeks and then made plans to meet after she came back from business. He kept telling us some of the details about this amazing lady he met, but we didn't want to be too invasive, so didn't ask a lot of questions. Luckily for him, her trip back was on a holiday, Thanksgiving week. We all happened to be at his house. She was supposed to fly in on Saturday, and he kept going to his room in private to chat with her about the details of her trip. He came down all sad and said she sent him a heartbreaking message. Her plane got stuck somewhere in Europe due to weather, I forget where, and while she was waiting, her purse was stolen. She had no phone and no credit cards, no ID or no tickets. She needed him to send money so she could get back home, and she was scared and alone in a country she had never visited. If we hadn't been there, and he'd told me some of the details, which of course set off my bullcrap alarms, he would have sent her a couple of grand to get back. I explained to him the concept of catfishing, and he didn't believe me at first. I had to ask him for some more details. How's she reaching him with no phone? She claimed she was borrowing laptops at the airport. How come she never talked on the phone? She said she gets very shy on the phone and prefers using the dating site to chat. What's the flight number so we can track it coming to the USA? She provided one, but it was bunk and not stuck due to weather. When we called her out on it, she tried the emotional tactic and said she was shaking in sadness and betrayal that he couldn't trust her after she gave him her heart. She kept going for emotional responses, but stopped responding to any attempts to get actual proof from her. We stopped responding a day or two later after she messaged him one last try and claimed a friend paid for a new ticket for her, but she still needed money, a lesser amount this time, to pay some sort of fine or she'd be stuck there and could maybe go to jail. He wouldn't want her to go to jail, would he? Yeah, it sucks that it happened because he's a super trusting guy. Even a few weeks later, he wasn't for certain that she wasn't real, despite the whole family telling him it was definitely a scam. I even kind of think he sent her money in the first part of the original ticket, and the family didn't get involved until the stolen purse part of the scam. Of course, she was most likely a he, using stolen pics online. I did do an image search on one of the photos, but nothing came up. The moral of the story? If you have anyone over 50 in your life, make sure you explain to them about different types of internet scams, especially if they're into shopping, dating, meeting friends, and stuff like that. It's a whole different world than what they grew up with, and the scammers are getting very good at it. I knew a few elderly people that have been scammed over the phone, but the internet brings a whole new level of scamming. About 10 years ago, I started chatting with a guy in one of the Yoohoo chat rooms. We'd only been chatting for a few weeks when he suddenly disappeared offline for about 2 weeks. I was so worried, but then his, quote, sister contacted me and told me he'd been in a terrible motorcycle accident. He was in the ICU, but she kept in touch with me to let me know how he was. After about a month, he got back online and we talked every day. We traded pics and eventually I got on webcam to say hi. He couldn't do the same because of some issues with his computer. We talked like this for nearly 3 years. It was around this time I realized that his sister was actually him. It didn't matter though, I was besotted with him, and I mean totally head over heels. Then one day, he just disappeared. His profile was deleted, all his accounts were gone, and I haven't heard a single word from him since. I still have absolutely no idea who he or she really was, and it messed me up for a long time. I still think about it at times. I'd do anything to know the truth. I don't know, maybe his real-life partner found out or something. So I have to level with you, viewers. I really don't understand these people or their victims. Like, I don't think I have the capacity to fall completely for someone who I've only talked to via a text medium online. Maybe I'm just an unromantic, more extroverted sort, which would be a surprise to me. It's fascinating to learn that this is such a big ongoing thing, though. On to the next one. It was when I was a teenager, not too long after the birth of ICQ. I'd met this one person in a chat room, and things started to get more and more personal. Not too long later, they eventually broke down and admitted that they'd been lying, and that they weren't a young hot girl, but instead a man. The guy seemed really remorseful, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him that I wasn't a young hot lesbian either. This might be a little late, but I actually unintentionally catfished someone. I was playing League of Legends, and this guy added me after we played a game. His English was broken, but I didn't think much of it, and we started to duo together. We did really well, but strangely, he kept referring to me as she. Again, I didn't think twice about it, and I just kept playing with him, but eventually he started to get real creepy and told me all these things about him. We found out that there was a significant time difference between us, but he'd log on at the most ridiculous times for him just to play with me, and started to become a white knight. Whenever anyone would trash talk me, which is pretty normal for League of Legends, he'd vehemently defend me and start fights with other team members, opposing players, and whoever else. Shortly after that, he'd start saying, "Good night, BB," which I thought was bye-bye. So I'd say, "Haha, good night, BB," back to him. Then he'd start sending me hearts, like the triangular bracket number 3, and I thought we were guys being guys, so I'd jokingly message that heart back to him. Eventually, he started calling me his girlfriend when he was defending me, and I realized he full-on thought I was a woman the entire time. I messaged him after that game and was like, "Dude, I'm a guy." And he went on a rampage. He started cussing me out, and by the end of it, the reason why he thought I was female was because of my username and because I used proper grammar and spelling. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. He claimed to be a US Marine, yet had an extravagant amount of free time to play Mamorpagas. Someone here on Reddit offered to run his name through the USMC database. Well, someone by his name did, but they'd been discharged in 1958 or something, whereas this guy claimed to be 21. Good old stolen valor. Similar thing happened to a guild I was in. The leader was supposedly a Canadian soldier with UN forces fighting warlords in Africa. It went so far that he got chemical burns in his lungs and sounded like heck on voice chat. Turns out it was all bullcrap. He had used a voice changer to sound raspy. It was so weird and the guild disbanded over it. I was probably 19, very bad with women, and very into role-playing on things called MUXs or MUXs. I think it was a very roleplay-centric all-text MMO. I met a girl on one of these MUXs. She was a senior in high school. I'd just graduated, and we started hanging out online, which went to let's call and talk about the plots we're running in, which became I love you a couple of weeks later. There was a lot of fun. I scanned my junk, she scanned hers, we sent it to each other. We'd sit on the phone and laugh about stuff until like 3 a.m. or whenever her dad would come in and tell her to hang up. She was the first girl I ever did the deed with on the phone. I still get a weird tingle when I see girls in videos using the bathtub to have fun. This was all before camera phones, so all I had to go on was my imagination. Well, calls started slowing down. Then the letters stopped getting responded to. Eventually, she just stopped talking to me altogether. About then, I started putting the pieces together, how her pictures were always like some girl in a crowd or some schoolgirl's photos, and how all my mail came back returned to sender until she gave me a new, completely different address. The signs were all there, I was just willfully ignoring them. I think there was probably some feelings on her end. My theory is that she was a lot younger than she was claiming, and I was talking a lot of nonsense about her moving to my state so we could be together. I think she got scared or her parents found out she was talking to an older guy and she cut contact. The romance seemed two-directional. I liked making her laugh and making silly plans with her. She genuinely seemed to enjoy my humor and company. But then again, she was telling me she was 17, and how hard is it not to laugh at 17 sometimes? So, if your name is Rashni, or if you pretended to be a girl named Rashni in like 2000s, no hard feelings. Thanks for laying the groundwork and making my current relationship, which has a temporary long-distance aspect, a lot easier. And whenever I think about our imaginary son, Spaghetti Bucket, I smile and I wish you well. I had a friend back in high school who was catfished, told us this story a week after it happened at a graduation party. He had been chatting with this girl from Florida for 3 years, decided to finally go and visit her for a week after our high school graduation. So he took a plane down and she was going to pick him up at the airport. He arrives and instead is greeted by her mother, who says her daughter is waiting for him back at the house. So he gets his bags and heads for the car with her. He notices this guy sitting in the back seat around his age. Funny that he didn't remember anything about her having a brother. He starts getting a little weirded out at this point. They finally arrive at the house. No girl in sight. He gets angry and has the mother spill the beans. Turns out this lady was using her niece's pictures to talk with him. How he didn't realize sooner, I don't know. Maybe they never talked on the phone, or maybe her voice sounded young. Anyways, he immediately left this lady and her son and spent the night at a hotel and had his parents pay for a plane ticket back home the next day. Okay, so for a moment I thought it was going to be the son in the back seat who was the catfish, and was wondering if he'd somehow got his mum in on the fishing, or if he'd hired someone to play his parent until they were back home. My god, I mean, story 3 in our video has me just thinking about how dangerous these situations can be, so in a way I was kind of relieved it was just a love-starved older gal. I was talking to this girl, initially from Twitter, who was easily a 9 out of 10, one of the hottest girls I've ever seen. That was my first clue, because the odds of her instantly going for an average guy like myself, who she'd never met, were very slim, especially as she had a fair few followers showing interest. Eventually, there were loads of inconsistencies in the stuff she told me about herself. She was way too clingy for someone who I'd never met. I just put that down to me being different, like not reciprocating any feelings or never telling her how hot she was and stuff like that. She wanted to meet me, but I decided against it after speaking to a friend who knew her in real life, and he told me she had a long-term boyfriend, despite her not having much experience with guys, according to her. I then started hearing rumors that she had 2 accounts on Facebook, and one of them, the one that added me, could be a fake or decoy. After that, I figured it was too much of a hassle to keep up with her. There were so many signs to avoid her, so I just cut off all contact. Funnily enough, I read a blog post a few years later from the real girl who said that this girl had been impersonating her for the past 10 years. She had been leading guys on and went really far with her charade up to the point where she seemed mentally unstable. So bullet dodged, I guess. What I should clarify is that this girl was not just using someone else's pictures, she was using the girl's life. She'd pretended to be the exact same girl in the picture and used her first name, her friends' names, her life story, everything. So in essence, anyone would think they were talking to the real girl and could tell the real girl everything about her, even though they didn't actually know her. She made fake Facebooks of loads of her friends and used to post pictures, taking them off the real girl's Facebook, and tag the fake profiles of these friends in, leaving comments. Arguably, this was true identity fraud more than catfishing, but the blog post stated that the catfish apologized and acknowledged she was crazy. She just didn't know how to stop and only did it because she enjoyed the fake life more than her own. And she never did stop until that blog post came out. I met someone on OkCupid. He was moving from New York City to my city and said he was a surgeon. That was my first red flag. I wondered why a successful surgeon was on a free dating site. We chatted for 2 weeks, but he didn't want to talk on the phone. Red flag number 2. At this point, I assumed he was fake. He deleted his profile, saying he couldn't wait to meet me in 3 weeks when he was scheduled to fly in for a weekend to find a condo. I reverse searched his picture and found another profile, same story, but it said he was moving to Phoenix. Red flag number 3. At this point, I know he's fake, but now I'm having fun making him think I'm totally hooked. He gave me bad med advice when I sprained my ankle, then told me he had a thing for feet, and he'd be making sure I'd get daily pedicures when I quit my job and moved in with him. The weekend he was supposed to fly in, his current almost former boss, quote, died, and he couldn't make it. I sent him screenshots of his other profile and told him I knew all along and I'd just been messing with him. Good times. I talked to this guy, Sean, for months, probably close to a year. Then, poof, gone. It sucked, but oh well. 6 months later, started talking to another guy with the same unusual middle name. He turned out to be Sean's ex-boyfriend, and about 80% of the stuff I knew about Sean was actually about him. He broke up with Sean 6 months before and took his phone back, and that's why he disappeared. In short, I met the real-life inspiration for the persona I was catfished with. Catfish here. I really like turkey liver, and the next thing I know, someone's yanking me out of the water and frying me with some okra and hush puppies. Okay, so I actually had this happen to me recently. I was using a dating app and started talking to this girl. She had 5 photos on there, 2 of her and 3 group photos. Nothing surprising for a girl on a dating site. We agreed to grab coffee, and I arrived early and sat outside, and this girl walks up to me and says hello. She introduced herself as the girl I was meeting, but didn't look anything like her. Something was familiar about her, but I couldn't go and take out my phone to check, so I went ahead with the date. We ordered coffee, and I thought about making a break for it right there when she went and put sugar in it, but decided to stay. Start talking, and we pick up the conversation we were having online, but after about half a cup, I'd had enough, and it wasn't going anywhere, so I made up some BS excuse and I left. Back in the car, I opened up my phone to look at her profile again, and figured out why she looked familiar. She was in the photos, she was one of the girls in the group, but she was using her friend as the main photo. Very weird. The sad part was that she wasn't terrible looking, just kind of boring, and she wasn't as good looking as her friend. I can't fathom the very sad lack of self-confidence of what was going on there. Well, most of these stories have been confusing to me, some have been outright infuriating, but this one is just sad. Here's hoping she found whatever community or activity would help her break out of her shell. When she showed up and had a male organ. 8 out of 10 would try again. My best friend's father found out when my friend told him. He was in love, but her photos were too perfect, so my friend got some proof together and broke the news to him. He took it well. I was catfished on a dating site. She was way too hot to be talking to me, and sure enough, she was a model in a relationship. Bummer. A few years back, it wasn't anything serious, just this girl sending me pictures when I was 12 or 13, and I sent some back. I logged into my old email when I was around 16, and I looked up the email she had used and found out it was this older man who posted up his email asking for girls. He sent me another girl's pictures. Piece of crap. I dated this woman for a few months who claimed she was a doctor. I thought, cool, and just went with it. I caught on by her continually talking about how she was going to buy a car. She'd claimed she had sold her car before moving. She also claimed she was going to buy me random things, claimed she was going to take me to Vegas, went on and on like this and never delivered on anything. I had suspicions for a while, but what finally provided evidence was looking her up in medical registries. She wasn't listed anywhere. I confronted her and she kept trying to make lame excuses for anything I asked about. Haven't talked to her since. When did a colossal idiot completely implode in court? I was on a jury where the defendant showed up in court day 1 wearing the exact same outfit as the unknown suspect in the video of the crime. It took only a few seconds before the judge immediately called a stoppage. All the lawyers went into the back with the judge and they came out like 7 minutes later and announced that the defendant had taken the plea deal. Wild. The client was being sued and he didn't like the opposing counsel or the judges, so he left the court a bunch of voicemails so profane that he was subject to a criminal contempt of court hearing. I will never understand these people. I've been before a magistrate twice in my life and you'd better believe I was as polite could be. What sort of damn fool looks at the person who can destroy their life with the bang of a gavel and thinks, I'm gonna give this guy a piece of my mind? With the utmost certainty in his voice, he yelled at the arresting officer, It's not domestic violence, I'm on public property. You could tell from his face that he really thought he had the cop over a barrel with that one. But let's just say reality stepped in pretty quick there. The petitioner attorney's client. The man claimed workers' compensation and threw the kitchen sink at us, meaning he basically listed just over half of his body parts on the claim petition, stating that he had injured each one. He was full of crap and my firm knew it. Anyways, we were going to trial and the day before, we ran one more social media search. This absolute frickin' moron posted a video of him winning a breakdance competition that was only a few months after the alleged work incident. Never saw a quicker dismissal in my life. One client of ours baffles me to this day. He had multiple cases, including aggravated battery and substance possession. At the insistence of the dude's family, we moved heaven and earth, getting him bond, so that he could get out of jail and live with said family until the case was over. The whole process took weeks. Less than a day after getting out, he was caught stealing $16 worth of batteries from Target. Bond revoked. To be fair, the line between stupidity and compulsion is blurred with this one. For anyone who's curious, we immediately ordered a psych evaluation for him. He was found competent, but it was also confirmed that he had mental health issues. The aggravated battery charge ended up being dropped and he took a plea for time served. My wife's lawyer bans all clients from using social media after he lost a big case. A wrongful death lawsuit where a man's wife was killed. Easy money, right? They were about to settle until the other side found his pictures online from a club a week after his wife died, with him underneath an exotic dancer whilst wearing a shirt that said, I love MILFs. Apparently they could prove that he didn't have that much pain and suffering anymore. Well, people deal with grief in very unusual ways, and it's honestly not impossible that this guy was in fact in a great deal of pain over the loss, but nonetheless, it is not a good look. Not in the US, but the judge asked if the defendant was remorseful. If you show regrets, you can have some leniency. No. The guy didn't understand the question, and when he doesn't, he just usually says no. Client added 9 years to his short sentence. He had got like a year or two from being involved in a drag race where the other guy crashed and severely injured someone else. Then, towards the end of his short prison term, he tried to escape and got 9 more years for prison escape. He became friends with John Lennon's killer in the New York prison, which was interesting. A guy I used to work with's brother-in-law got injured at work and was suing for a hefty sum. The case was pretty much open and close. All the evidence was in the brother-in-law's favor. Until he started talking. They asked him to tell them about the day of the accident. The brother-in-law started out fine until he got to the point where he approached the piece of equipment that injured him. He tells everyone that there was a note on it stating that it was out of order. The brother-in-law then says that he discarded the note and started up the piece of malfunctioning equipment as he had a job to do. That easy win was discarded faster than that out-of-order sign. The worst clients to defend are the ones that think they're smarter than they are. When it comes time for depositions, broad, sweeping statements of how I would never allow discrimination in my office and how I'm 100% sure I never said that are a great way to destroy your own credibility, set yourself up to get eviscerated by opposing counsel, and ultimately turn a nuisance value bullcrap case into something worth 6 figures. The moral of the story? If you're going to ignore the entire day of deposition prep I did with you, just so you can protect your own fragile ego on the record, at least do me the courtesy of telling me to F off ahead of time. I had an instructor who was a prosecutor. He called a witness who had seen the whole thing and had an interest in seeing the defendant punished. Slam dunk case, right? She thought she was on TV. She overreacted every word, completely embellished the retelling of events, didn't lie, but she was the center of her version of events. He said you could see the faces of the jury members sour minute by minute. He lost the case. I was defending a client who was accused of trademark infringement. He thought he knew better than the IP attorney assigned to the case, me, and so he went on his company's website to defend himself by basically confessing to what he did and claiming it wasn't against the law and that the trademark owner was a, quote, woke baby who needed to either, quote, learn the law or get back in the kitchen and make her husband a sandwich. I really wish I could say I was joking. I was one email away from negotiating a settlement that would have allowed the continued use of the complainant's mark with limited restrictions and a very nominal fee. Little to say, she saw his website, told us to go F ourselves and dragged it before a judge. My client lost huge. His lack of self-control cost him thousands of dollars. I worked in a firm. Workers' compensation claim, a guy falls down at work and claims he injured many different parts of his body, shoulders, knees, and back. We told him to stay off social media. No problem, he doesn't use social media. At the trial, he tells the judge he used to be a spin class instructor, but since the accident, he can't teach classes anymore. Well, turns out he continued to teach these classes after his injury. This was proved by hours of surveillance the insurance company did, showing him teaching and vigorously riding in spin class. How did the insurance company know he was still an active instructor? The guy posted his full teaching schedule on his Facebook page. His potentially very lucrative claim was quickly changed to a fraud claim against him. Not me, but a colleague. A wealthy client's son got picked up for substance dealing at a local music festival. The client bailed him out and then had his whole fancy law firm defend his son. The son then shambled into the courtroom, clearly on something, and loudly attempted to buy substances off the bailiff. There wasn't a lot the lawyers could do after that. The client was part of a group of people who were involved in the worst sorts of crime, notably particularly horrific forms of the unspeakable act. During their crime spree, one of their victims sadly lost their life. Our guy's defense was that he was just a voyeur. So although he was there, he wasn't involved in the actual murder. He was on bail the whole time, including the trial, up to when he decided to change his story and say instead that he hadn't been there. His sister gave evidence that he'd come home that night covered in blood. He got a long, long time. Paralegal. Once had a convicted criminal explain to me how their murder charge should be overturned because the victim didn't die at the scene of the crime. The victim died at the hospital, therefore the defendant couldn't be charged with anything more than attempted murder. Did anyone see the video of the guy doing an online court hearing for driving without a license? He answers the call while he's driving, without a license. Recently, he was in court, and apparently part of the requirements of this guy was that he not talk to his family. He called his mother on Mother's Day. The judge said, "Your mother seems to care about your freedom as little as you do. Put the cuffs on him." I don't know the perimeters of this case, I was just a bystander in court. The lawyer, in sweats mind you, said, "Judge, I told her, you can't fix stupid." It was wild to watch. I used to review disability claims, so I often worked with clients who had lawyers. A man whose attorney had instructed him not to speak with us directly, which is a very smart, very basic recommendation, called me up to rant angrily that his lawyer was wrong. He could shop for groceries and mow the lawn and do all sorts of housework just fine, thank you. Now, I'd seen this man's medical records. There was no way he was doing all of that without difficulty, so I probed a little further. He could shop for groceries as long as he used a mobility scooter and had his wife carry things in the house. He could mow the lawn if he used a riding mower and took a lengthy break every 10 minutes or so. He could do housework, which was limited to wiping down counters and folding but not carrying laundry. I called his attorney and gave them a quick update as soon as he and I hung up. I approved his claim, but that man is so damn lucky he got someone who was willing to take an extra 15 minutes with him. Did the guy just not want to get his claim approved? What was happening here? Bizarre. Maybe it was some form of not wanting to admit to himself that his condition had got to that point? Who knows? I was in courtroom watching injunctions and restraining orders play out. One case, this woman was there, but the man was in prison, so he was calling in. After deciding on an agreement, the guy asked if he could make a statement. At the end of his statement, he asked, "And tell the woman to go F herself." He got an additional 6 months in prison. The guy asked to make another statement after getting a tongue lashing from the judge, and he did it again, telling her to go F herself, and got another 6 months. Imagine losing a year of your life because you couldn't shut up for 5 minutes. Around 1990, there was a guy on trial for armed robbery. He pled not guilty. A witness on stand identified the defendant. The defendant jumped to his feet and roared, "I should have blown your head off when I had the chance." He paused, thinks, and added, "If I had been the one who robbed you." A friend of mine used to be a latent print analyst, going to get prints off a suspected arrest for breaking into a home to rob it. While she's getting the ink and paper set up, the suspect shouts, "What do you need the prints for? She looked right at me when I kicked in the door." I'm a criminal defense lawyer. Client was arrested on a DUI. Client lived in a small town. He and his wife would drive to the one bar in town, drink, then walk to their houseboat after a night at the bar. It was a quarter-mile away. He and the wife know everyone in the bar. Another patron that they know gets blasted. The bar owner says she can't stay. The client and wife walk her to his car to stay there until the ride comes. The client gets in the back seat of the SUV. The client is drunk, drops keys on the way to the front seat, opens the now unlocked front door, turns on the car lights to see. He walked around the front from the rear passenger seat. The cops are waiting to see if people leave the bar drunk, see the lights, so of course suspect driving, and immediately roll up and arrest the client. This client has a prior DUI from about 12 years before. The judge agreed that it wouldn't come in. The jury wouldn't hear it unless he, quote, opened the door. You can't win the case unless the guy testifies. I prep him, continue to prep him, keep prepping him, but keep telling him under no circumstances can he say that he would never drive drunk. Never make broad statements like that. Basically, nothing about the past. No. Direct questioning is going well. I gave him a beautiful, easy last question where he could explain the night and explain why he was upset he got arrested. Because he wasn't driving and was doing everything right. He then says, "I would never do something like that." The door is open, the judge lets in the rebuttal, brings up the old DUI, and the jury takes about 25 minutes to convict. And that's one of about 100 stories. Life is never dull in the criminal defense world. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was a legal clerk for a couple of years in college. Still baffles me how this one made it all the way to the trial. A lady slipped and fell at a chain restaurant and hurt her back irreparably. Wanted a huge payout. She said she slipped on butter that was on the floor. On cross-exam, she was asked what kind of butter, and she answers, "The little pats of butter they put out in the buffet." The defense immediately recalled the store manager. The store had never used that type of butter. The case ended pretty quickly. My dad's psychotic ex-girlfriend was trying to press bogus charges against him, trying to ruin his life and career. And his family. She attempted to make up some things about me too. I had to go through interviews, detectives' office talks, AP's visits. My dad and I filed protective orders. Her response to the protective orders, and I was afraid it would happen, was to vandalize a part of his property in a very gross and obscene way. She also went back to the detective to make up another claim on me, saying I stole her non-prescribed substances, so basically admitting she had illegal substances. So she got a bit more than just a protective order against her. She had jail time now too. Good riddance. I'm not a lawyer, and this isn't my story. But the lawyer who handled my business stuff and had a legal dispute is a federal judge. Before he became a judge, he was a lawyer for divorces and civil stuff. A wealthy male client filed for divorce. There's a prenup. It's pretty ironclad. It discusses the distribution of wealth. The alimony, if any, is laid out at X amount, increasing yearly based on inflation. There is one major exception, and that is if you're caught cheating, you automatically get the worst terms of the prenup. There were also criteria laid out for what constituted cheating. In the woman's case, if she cheats, she gets 0 alimony and gets a one-time payment of $100,000. In the man's case, if he cheats, he loses the main family home, all cars that aren't his daily driver, and 1/4 of his business. A buyout option is available but doesn't matter in this story. The lawyer gets to court and meets with his client in a conference room, and the client is beaming. He shakes the lawyer's hand and says, "Hey Mike, I want you to meet Jasmine. I met her 2 months ago. She's amazing. We got engaged over the weekend in France." And Mike shook her hand and slumped in his chair and said, "So, we've got a major problem. You're cheating on your wife with her, and legally this is discovery and I'm required to hand over to the other side." The client is all, "How the frick am I cheating? We're separated." And Mike is all, "Cheating is any bedroom contact before divorce is final. It's in your prenup that you wrote on your own." And the guy flipped out. He ended up being so mad he ditched court, which gave him a default judgment, meaning she gets everything she asked for, plus because of the cheating, plus not showing up, the judge ordered the transfer of money within 30 days, as part of the initial agreement between both parties. And he's not there to contest it, so blam. The guy ended up trying to sneak the company to the new woman via a trust, but it's an illegal move. He also tried to hide the money with her by giving her $1.1 million in cash in the form of a bank transfer, but the judge stopped that once he found out and required the woman repay the money since she was given notice as well. He fought for years and ended up losing money, time, energy, his business, house, 6 to 7 cars, and his new wife. Now, because I know his daughter from work, he's a retired angry man living in rural New Mexico. He can't afford to golf more than once a month, and he posts about how women are scum. What an absolute moron. You can't think that he was a genius of the business world if he did such a colossally stupid job of overseeing and signing these binding documents. Probably another one of these, quote, self-made men who actually just inherited it all. Sucks to suck. I was in the jury for a 3-defendant murder trial. We sat through weeks of testimony, and from the sheer amount of direct evidence the state had, it was extraordinarily obvious very early on that Defendant 1 had committed the crime. Defendant 2, Defendant 1's brother, and Defendant 3, their girlfriend, were much less obvious, and we were being asked by the state to consider circumstantial evidence to draw the conclusion they wanted us to. That is, until Defendant 3 decided to take the stand. Defendant 3's attorney did a very good job of painting her as the victim of the other's treatment. Her attorney had us feeling sorry for this poor, unintelligent woman who had been groomed since she was 16 by a man 20 years her senior. From the attorney's narrative, Defendant 3 was basically Defendant 1's slave. He controlled what she wore, what she did, and even who she talked to. He even made her get a tattoo saying she was Defendant 1's property. We saw a text about Defendant 1 killing Defendant 3's puppy because she made him mad about something small. We had seen texts from Defendant 3 to Defendant 1 cheering him on after he'd sent her pictures of a bloody knife, the murder weapon, but her attorneys had us questioning if those words were just her playing the role of supportive partner so he didn't come after her next. We were starting to believe that she was terrified for her own safety and that's why she didn't report her boyfriend. I mean, clearly this man was a maniac, and it seemed reasonable that she just didn't know how to escape him. Then another defendant's attorneys and the DA tore her apart on cross-examination. They made her look argumentative, tripped her up in multiple lies, and by the time they were done, based on her own testimony, it was pretty clear that she did in fact know the victim and had been the one to plan the entire murder. Shoot, we'd even started to feel like she'd probably manipulated Defendant 1 more than he manipulated her. The other defendants did not take the stand, perhaps smartly. When we went to deliberations, we all discussed how bad of an idea it was for her to testify. We'd decided Defendant 1 was guilty on all counts within the first 5 minutes. Defendant 3 was almost as quick. We decided that while she didn't physically commit the murder, she had conspired and was just as culpable, whatever the formal charge for that was. Defendant 2 took the longest. We all felt pretty strongly that he was somehow involved, but that the DA had not met their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt, so we had to return a not guilty verdict on all counts. I used to work at a workman's comp firm, and let me tell you, the people who hurt themselves after they've started getting comp, oftentimes doing stuff around the house, falling off a ladder, using tools, going horseback riding, stuff like that. They get hurt again and the insurance company is off the hook. And many of them get their doctors to write notes saying they're fine so that they can work, because they're bored at home with a huge injury, and then they're baffled that they don't get workman's comp anymore. Then they overexert themselves because of the injury that isn't better. Had a domestic violence case. For months, we went to preparatory hearings and gathering evidence and got restraining orders. By the time the trial was finally happening, on the same morning of the hearing, the person I'd represented let me know that she'd gone on holidays with the defendant for a couple of weeks and had a grand old time. At that point, the opposing counsel approached me and told me he had lots of evidence of both parties having a great time together. This, of course, doesn't mean the awful stuff didn't happen in the past, but it really undermined our case where we had little evidence other than some testimonials. At that point, I had to explain to her how even beyond strict legal rules, the judge could potentially change her mind once she saw the claimant was out partying with the defendant, for whom a restraining order was requested. We settled and avoided the trial. I'm not a trial lawyer, but a real estate one. I had clients spend $15,000 on new lounge furniture and 4 TVs with their closing money 48 hours before I was due to close for them. I'm pretty sure that losing a $5 million defamation case and then immediately making more statements and having it raised to $90 million is pretty far up the list. Custody case. The mom was bat crap crazy and flew that flag when she was recorded saying she was going to drive her SUV off the highest bridge in our city, with 3 kids in the car. Days like that killed pieces of my soul. I handle work comp claims. This one always cracks me up. The guy claims bilateral wrist injuries from repetitive motion cutting meat. We get word, aka he posted on Facebook, about him competing in an MMA-style event. We send our surveillance there, which gets this guy fighting with no issues. Sounds like if for some reason the narrator is ever living in the States and fraudulently claiming workers' comp, all I have to do is continue my current lifestyle. Stay indoors, never go outside, never post on social media, and play video games to pass the time until the case is won. So how do so many other people screw it up so badly? It was a credit card fraud case in the early part of my career. He actually wore the stolen clothes to court, and a clerk at the defrauded store identified them in front of the jury. I felt like the guy in the commercial that asks, "Do you ever want to be somewhere else?" My uncle used to be a prison manager at the local prison in the area of New Zealand where I grew up. They had hearings when the prisoners had done something against the rules. They'd go before a couple of prison workers and explain, kind of like an internal hearing, I guess. Uncle was the judge for a lot of these. One guy had been found with a cell phone, denied up and down that it was his, that he didn't know where it came from, all that stuff. My uncle asked him several times if he wanted to own up, and he absolutely insisted the phone wasn't his. So my uncle said, "All right, well, someone's wasted $100 on a phone then." And the prisoner then said, "Oh, get fricked, I paid $600 for that." My uncle just glared at him. Oh, I miss his work stories. Client returns to court drunk after luncheon adjournment, falls asleep, and his head drops right into the side of the witness box, whereupon he proceeds to snore. Loudly. Client charged with DUI, forced by police to give a urine sample on the side of a very busy interstate highway. Any sympathy the jury might have had for the defendant was lost, however, when he fell asleep during the playing of the video of the traffic stop. He had been out all night partying the night before trial. He was found guilty. Then he lied to the judge about what would be in his system during a substance test, and his sentence was doubled. When did you get wrecked for trying to do a good thing for an ungrateful jerk? Last night, my friends and I found a woman's wallet on the sidewalk in downtown Athens, Georgia. The driver's license had a name and date of birth, and she had a University of Georgia student card. We looked her up in the UGA directory and called her to return the wallet. She was grateful, and we felt like heroes. Well, guess what? She showed up to meet us with her tough guy boyfriend, who smelled like a brewery and accused us of stealing it. They tried to interrogate us for 5 minutes straight as we attempted to hand them the wallet and leave. We were baffled. We're 6 well-dressed UGA alumni and students, 2 females, 4 males, some in their 30s, working professionals, who had driven to meet her voluntarily to return the wallet. And she thought we were the thieves. It was unreal. They claimed $500 was missing from the wallet. Our immediate response was, "You carry around $500 in your wallet?" The boyfriend became irate and screamed, "Y'all ain't going nowhere till I found out which one of you frickin' gay slurs took it." Exact quote. Again, there were 6 of us there and 1 of him. Needless to say, we weren't intimidated. The girlfriend looked scared. I diffused the situation, separated everyone, and got the heck out of there. Anyone else ever do something nice that not only goes unappreciated, but you actually suffer for it? Tell me, what's your best "no good deed goes unpunished" story? I found a cell phone in the middle of the street. Nobody was around, so I figured I should check the contacts to find out who owned it. I figured home was a safe bet. I call and start talking after they pick up, only to be torn apart by the owner's mum, who thinks that I've stolen it. Apparently, the phone was lost the day before and they were looking. Anyways, the dude who owned it gave me $30 for returning it and $10 for, quote, dealing with his mum. So my good deed was punished, but I got a reward for being punished. Yay? In line at a 7-Eleven behind an elderly woman. She pays for her things and leaves. There's a banana sitting on the counter. The cashier looks up and calls out, "Miss, your banana," but she doesn't hear. I bolt after her and catch up quickly. "Hey, I think you left your banana inside." She turns to me and glares. "I didn't want the banana, you little bag of crap," and continues walking away. I found a wallet outside on a patio by the smokers area at a bar one time. So, as a smoker, I just hung out outside and asked everyone that came back out if they lost their wallet. One girl was like, "Oh my god, I did?" And I asked her to describe it. She did. I pulled it out and she was like, You took my freaking wallet." And I said, no, it was sitting on that bench right there. I figured it was better if I tried to find the owner rather than just let it sit there on a busy Friday night. She said, "I have every right to call the cops." I just said, "All right, wow, try to do a nice thing for someone? Whatever," and I threw her wallet into the parking lot and went back inside the bar. She called me a homophobic slur and told the bouncer to, quote, "throw that guy out," because I stole her wallet. The bouncer was standing on the patio the whole time and saw the freakout, and even the bouncer said he was only trying to help, and then he just ignored her ranting. I went inside and never heard or saw anything from her ever again. Okay, that's our second paranoid or scam artist ungrateful jerk who used that particular derogatory term that we can't say on YouTube, beginning with F. So there you have it. The correlation between stupidity and prejudice against the gays is very real. I found a dog, a pit bull, wandering in my neighborhood along a busy street. I hopped out of my car and put my dog's spare collar on him to keep him from being hit. I walked to all the nearby houses and knocked on the doors asking if anybody belonged to the dog or if they knew who did. After about 10 houses, I gave up and took him home. That afternoon, I made found dog flyers, without the dog's picture, about 100 in all, and put them up around the area. In front of my house, I put a big one so people would know that this was the place. After a few days, I'd pretty much resigned myself to keeping the guy when I got a phone call. This lady gave a perfect description of the dog, and I told her she could swing by and pick him up. About an hour later, she shows up with the cops. She gets out of her car and greets me with, "Are you the butthole that stole my dog?" I was, of course, taken aback. I stood there with a slack jaw, not knowing what to say. "I asked you a question. Did you steal my dog?" "What? No. I found a dog and tried to find his home." "You stole him, and I have witnesses." She then tried to get the officer to arrest me. It only took a few moments for the officer to realize that she was in fact crazy. "So he stole your dog, asked all of your neighbors who the dog belonged to, put up signs saying that he had the dog, and then invited you over to take the dog back. Ma'am, either he's the worst criminal in the world or you don't understand the definition of stole." She then claimed that I stole the dog for the reward money. The officer said he didn't see an offer for a reward, nor did I ask for one. "But just out of curiosity, how much reward money were you going to offer?" asked the officer. $200. That's what he wants. That's why he took the dog. "Well, we have no evidence of him stealing the dog, but it seems to me that he's earned the reward." That was the worst $200 I ever earned. I used to work for Walmart. Not once did a good deed go unpunished. If ever I found a wallet or purse, I'd carry it by the corner at arm's length and open it looking for an ID while under a camera, still keeping it at arm's length. That way, when they accused me of stealing, which I would never do, there was plenty of video coverage to protect me. Same with cell phones. I'd always look for a contact, mum or dad first. If I couldn't find one, I'd check recent calls. But I would always handle the thing like plutonium. I managed a pool for 10 years. It had a zero-depth area where the water got gradually deeper, like a beach. This was also the area with all the kiddie toys. Parents would send their toddlers out there on their own while they chatted, read, or sunbathed. The thing was like a succubus for toddlers, and 3 or 4 of them would go under daily, resulting in my guards or me going in and saving the lives of these children, lest they see Davy Jones' locker. The parents basically thought we were babysitters and didn't give a damn about their children while they were swimming. At least once a week, I'd have to deal with some parent flipping out about how their kid was fine and we had no right to touch them. Threats were made about cops and lawyers. Luckily, we always had a patrolman on duty at our pool. He'd laugh in their faces and threaten to arrest them for neglect, which usually shut them up. Once, one of my 98-pound female lifeguards saved 2 kids at the same time. Her reward? A smack across the face from an irate mother. I've never seen a cop react so fast. I missed that job. In short, watch your frickin' kids while they're at the pool. I was on the bus and I noticed some guy on his BlackBerry. Then I dozed off for a few minutes and I woke up and noticed the guy had left his phone on the bus. I picked it up and tried to find a number in it that I could dial to let him know I had it. I checked his Facebook and saw he'd updated his status from home saying some thug on the bus robbed him. He also said how horrible people are in LA, how it's a city filled with thieves and stuff like that. I updated his status, correcting him and letting him know that I had it and I could send it to him. He emailed me his address and I mailed it to him. He didn't even send a thank you email back. The guy was a prick. I stopped a man beating a woman at a bar. Instead, the woman started to hit me along with the guy. Then at the end, the man beat the woman again, saying he didn't need her help. I live in an area with fairly low-priced rentals, so it's full of college kids and people who are of lower incomes. I was at the corner store, and the family in front of me had a case of beer, a 12-pack of Coke, a few packs of cigarettes, chicken nuggets, macaroni and cheese, and some milk. Their debit card got denied, so they took out the milk. Got denied again, took out the chicken. Got denied again, took out the mac and cheese. Finally, their purchase was approved, so they were going home with beer, Coke, and cigs. Their 2 kids, maybe 4 and 6, asked what they were having for dinner if they didn't have the chicken and nuggets. The mother's response was, "You can drink Coke, it's got calories." The younger kids started crying for the chicken nuggets. The mum grabbed her by the arm and told her she wasn't getting any dinner. I brought their chicken nuggets and ran after them. I tried to give them the box, and the mum started screaming at me, "Do we look like a fricking charity case? I can raise my own fricking kids. You don't know what it's like being a mum." And tons of other bullcrap. I was like, just take the goddamn chicken, your kids are hungry. The woman hit the box out of my hands, and she and her man grabbed the kids and stormed away. I wish I'd followed them and called CPS or something. Eesh, yeah, those kids need to be with people who put them before their own unneeded comforts. Coke and cigarettes should be some way under your children getting fed properly on your priority list. So, I was outside this fast food place that sold hot dogs. I saw a homeless woman with a shopping cart trying to come out of the joint. She was struggling to open the door, so I did the gentlemanly thing and held the door open for her. I didn't know if that hobo was on smack or something, but she started yelling at me, telling me that she didn't need any help and told me to F right off. I let go of the door, it smacked her right in the face. I went shopping for a Halloween party with 2 friends from work. At the grocery store, one of the girls lost her wallet. We tore apart my car looking for it, went back into the store and looked everywhere. We never found it. 2 days later, I was back on that side of town, and I decided to go in and check for it in Lost and Found. We lived pretty far from that store, and she had no means of transportation. Somebody had found it. So, they let me take it to return it to her. Well, she wasn't too excited when I showed up at work with it. She was acting weird. I guess she and the other friend decided I was playing her the whole time. Like I was hiding it so I could be the hero and return it to her. Lesson learned. I'm a girl, by the way, not a guy white knighting this other girl. We all worked together at Target. She was 19, I was 30. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Caution, this one is sad. My uncle's best friend is a man named Terry. Terry was a large man and quite the bruiser. In the mid-90s, Terry was at a local dive bar when he hears a man screaming at a woman. He really rips into her, spewing obscenities loudly across the bar. Terry steps in, tells the guy to keep it down, or to take it home. Nobody wants to hear their problems. The girl runs off to the bathroom crying, and the man apologizes to Terry, telling him, "Sorry man, I just found out she cheated on me." The guy promises to keep it down, and Terry walks away. When the girl comes back from the bathroom, the yelling resumes, and the guy hauls off and hits her. The girl runs off, and Terry comes charging over to give the guy an ultimatum. Terry offers to kick the crap out of the guy or let him walk out on his own. The guy chooses the latter. A couple of minutes pass, and the bar phone rings. It's a call for Terry. Terry picks up the phone and almost instantly drops to the floor in agony. The man went across the street to a payphone, called the bar, asked for Terry, then snuck back in and stabbed him 3 times in the back, making him a paraplegic. The guy took off running, but was caught later. Being that Terry was a big biker with a bunch of big biker friends, the man had fled for fear of retaliation, then turned himself in. Terry is and always will be in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down, all for standing up for a girl who was getting beat up by her boyfriend. A buddy of mine blew the motor in his truck. I knew of an engine 200 miles away that would be a good replacement, so I drive there, pay $250 to load it in my truck and drive it back. I leave the motor at the local shop and it gets put in the truck. 1 week later, he sells the truck and never pays me for the motor. He had cancer, so I wasn't about to use him as a kickball. He died 6 years ago. The cancer was the reason I went out of my way to help. I lent a very good friend about $500. His parents were fairly well off, and I knew his parents sent him a huge check every birthday because we'd always travel right after he got the check. It was an annual 10 grand gift the parents are allowed to distribute tax-free to their kids. So I knew I'd get it back in a few weeks. Being mindful, I told him under no uncertain terms that this was a loan and expected to be paid back by X date. Period. He agreed. Well, payback date came and passed and nothing, yet his birthday was about 2 weeks afterwards, so I waited until after his birthday. Still no check. I called him on it and asked what happened. I got lie after lie. First, his checking account was compromised, then he needed to order checks. Then he was waiting for his parents' check to arrive. He even went so far as to send me a check on a closed account, which was stupid because I knew from talking to him the account was closed and he didn't bank there anymore, and it had his old address on it from 2 years ago. I asked him why he'd send me a check on a closed account, and I got yelled at for, quote, not being a good friend, and for not being supportive of his problems. I was very nice to him up until this point, but I let him have it. I'm not a good friend. I lend you $500 so you can pay your rent and don't say a word about it for weeks, and you say I'm not supportive. A good friend would pay me back without the lies and forcing me to call you and ask you for the money. I had a check in the mail the same week, and I haven't talked to him since. If you're reading this, screw you. I helped 2 guys out of a crushed car, putting my life in danger as the gas was spilling out. They ran away as soon as I got them out. Turns out the car was stolen and the police were onto them. The cops found me on top of the car holding the door open and arrested me. I spent the night in jail for that good deed. Another time I worked in a restaurant at the beach. As I was closing, I saw a kid wandering around crying. I abandoned my work and stayed with her for 4 hours or something, calling the cops, trying out numbers that she remembers, stuff like that. When the cops and the parents finally came, they started interrogating me like I'd kidnapped her or something. After some time, I got angry and started shouting, and they just told me to go away. Not even a thank you or anything. Another time, a guy in front of me at the ATM left a full wallet on the machine and walked away. I wasn't paying attention to him, so I didn't even notice what he was wearing. So I took the wallet into the bank and explained at the counter what had happened. There's a wad of cash in there. I say I have to leave, but was asked politely at first that I have to stay until they contact the owner. I say I have to leave. I had something important to do. Instead, the security guys detain me for like 30 minutes until the owner shows up. He says everything is in there. I'm just standing there. Nobody told him that I found it. They just told me, you can leave now. I had dreadlocks all these times and my skin color is of the darker kind, so maybe that played a role. Maybe not. I just continue doing good when I can, and most of the time, it's appreciated. I was at the mall, and some little boy came up to me, asking, can you help me find my mummy? I walked him over to the security desk and had them page her. She showed up 30 minutes later and then got all angry at me, acting like I was some kind of weird predator. She then stormed off with her unfortunate son, but not before he yelled, thanks, mister, to me. I feel bad for that kid. Well, at least her kid was a civilized person, even if she wasn't. I was about to say that maybe we can give her the benefit of the doubt as a concerned parent, but then I remember you saying that it took her 30 minutes to come and collect her kid in the same mall. So I guess the odds of her just being trash rose substantially again. This is why when I found someone's bank card lying in the street, I picked it up, handed it in at the bank the next day, and got out of there quickly. I didn't want to be arrested for stealing, for helping some poor student who'd lost their card. It was obviously a student, it had been lost outside the university nightclub. I'm writing this as the witness of the punishers. So my boyfriend and I had just graduated and were naturally receiving some cards in the mail. Some with money, some without, whatever. Anyways, my boyfriend has this grandpa who inherited a ton of money way back when and has since invested, by which I mean lost, most of it in the stock market. The family always rants about how he doesn't give a crap about them and tries to milk him for money. He bought their 2 cars before he lost a bunch of his money. My boyfriend received a card from him with no money in it and laughed at the snarky message. Money is fleeting, knowledge is power, and seemed happy enough. A few days later, his mum was making a list of everyone who sent him cards. She even writes down how much each person sent, as if that would determine the extent of her thank you, and compares the amounts. When the grandpa comes up and she remembers he didn't send any money, she doesn't write his name down. Apparently she planned to only send thank yous to the people who sent cash. She and her husband then proceeded to bitterly remark, with the biggest eye rolls possible, that since the grandpa had decided to help pay for my boyfriend's college education, they guessed that made up for it. As someone who hasn't seen or heard from my grandparents and the majority of my extended family since I was 5 due to family pettiness, I was teed off. When I was 17, a gust of wind ripped my car door out of my hand and into the car that I was parked next to. I went into the store and had the manager call for the owner of the car using the description and license plate number. Nobody came forward. I went back out to the parking lot and waited for the owner to show up. When the owners arrived, I told them I was sorry that I'd dinged the side of their door. I showed them the small dent and offered to exchange insurance information. The wife was a straight-up witch. She started huffing and puffing, walking around her car and finding other dents in her fender, rear quarter panel, places that it would have been impossible for my door to have caused damage. I told her that I didn't cause any of the other stuff and she should be lucky that I was an honest person, as most people would have just found another parking spot and not told her at all. Her husband came to my rescue and calmed her down and explained that I couldn't have caused the other dents. He even opened up my door to show it wasn't possible. She went on and wanted to exchange insurance info. Her husband ushered her into their car and told me to just go. He said he wasn't worried about the dent I caused and thanked me for being so honest. As they were pulling away, his wife glared at me until I was out of sight. I had a letter in my mailbox, so I opened it as I tend to do with things I find in my mailbox. I hadn't realized that the name on the envelope was someone I'd never heard of, but the address was correct except there was a unit number even though I live in a townhouse. It was 3 passports and cash with a letter from Canada Customs and Immigration. I decided to take a shot in the dark and try the building across the street and found her name in the building directory. She came down and proceeded to give me crap for opening her letter. I told her it was an accident and that everything was in there, but it had no effect on her. I said, "No problem, any future letters for you will go in the garbage unopened," and I walked away. But even if I did get another letter for her, I'd probably still drop it off. I have a few of one of my ex-best friends taking advantage. One that comes to mind is that he was behind on some money, and I let him borrow my netbook to Skype with his wife while he went overseas. It ended up getting smashed or broken somehow, and he wasn't able to pay me back when he returned. But he'd bought himself a new laptop and tons of stuff for himself before paying me a dime. I also let him borrow my 360 while I was overseas so his kid and he could play, since it was just going to be sitting in a garage anyway. I never saw that thing again because evidently it was stolen. That's just a few things of a whole laundry list of things I've done for that guy, but I think a lot of it was my own fault for not being more mindful of him and how he exploited my weakness towards helping friends out. I managed to get $100 out of him for my netbook. It cost around $250, and that was about the end of our friendship. I have a hard time doing good deeds for people after that happened. There was this huge scandal in China a while back while I was living in Shanghai. An elderly woman was crossing the street and was hit by a guy on a scooter. She fell down and was injured while the man who hit her drove off. A man nearby saw what happened and came over to help her and offered to take her to the hospital. The old lady freaked out and started accusing the man of hitting her, which he didn't. Her response was, "Why are you offering to help me if you didn't knock me down in the first place?" She pressed charges and took him to court, and it was a media frenzy in China. I don't know what actually happened from the court cases, since, the Chinese tend to make these news stories mysteriously disappear if it gains too much attention. Between these answers and the ones about encountering horrible customers, I have the sudden urge to murder people. Lawyers. Which fictional villain would be a slam dunk to defend in court? Robbie Rotten. His crimes mostly just aren't? Does Dr. Doom even need a legal defense? As the ruler of his own country, does diplomatic immunity cover all of his actions? That's how he keeps getting away with things in the comics, right? He's the legal sovereign leader of a respected modern country, so he can't be arrested for fear of provoking a war. They did try a few times, replacing him with someone who has better legal right to the country, but they always turn out to be crazy tyrants, as opposed to Dr. Doom, who's generally at least a reasonable dictator. So he usually wins it back. Provided you can put up with his egotism and restrictions, the overall standard of living seems pretty good. The trains are almost certainly running on time. Plus, before Doom, it was a backwater, tiny Eastern European nation that changed hands every few decades to increasingly worse options. Now it's a major global superpower with some of the most advanced technology on the planet. Whatever your opinion on Doom personally, on some level, that must feel good. Most of the old-school Scooby-Doo villains, they didn't really do anything other than scare people off their private property. Most of them were doing so for illegal reasons though, like insurance fraud or tax evasion or whatever. When I was a kid, I remember being devastated in the movie Big Daddy when the social worker took Zack and Cody away from Adam Sandler. But after watching it again as an adult, although I'm still sad, I'm thinking, yeah, fricking of course they're going to take him away from this stranger. So the social worker from Big Daddy is a layup case. Not to mention Sandler's character literally lied to social services so his unemployed, lazy butt could have a child. That guy should have been arrested. In the same vein, Mrs. Doubtfire. Daniel couldn't hold down a job or apartment, so of course he wasn't in a position to have joint custody. but then he literally dresses up as an old woman and deceives his entire family to have time with his kids. Then they take the kids away, like of course they're going to remove the children from someone who's unstable enough to see assuming a new identity and lying to my whole family as a better alternative to get my crap together so I can see my kids. Definitely Lex Luthor. 99% of the time he uses henchmen who won't talk, and he can definitely pay my exorbitant bills. We're going to get a lot of variation on the answers here today, and I think this one, the villain who is definitely in the wrong, but very good at concealing it and would be a great repeat client, is a very interesting answer. And classic lawyer, defending a scumbag if the bill is high enough. Who am I kidding? I'd probably burn down a kindergarten for that sort of money. Mojo Jojo. This one is good because typically animals can't commit crimes. They'd have to establish legal personhood first. Animals may not be capable of committing crimes, but then they have no civil rights either, such as a right to trial or to legal representation. If you rely on non-personhood as a defense, he gets sent to a zoo at best, or at worst, put down. It's the defense that wants to prove personhood, not the state. You know, I could mount a pretty solid wrongful death case on behalf of the boy who cried wolf. Bucky Barnes or the Winter Soldier. I think the insanity defense, though it's not called that anymore, would actually apply here. Get a group of certified expert psychiatrists and doctors together, get their testimony and depositions, set a competency hearing, and in the event he's deemed competent, use witness testimony and the USSR and Hydra documentation to prove he wasn't in charge of his actions. Boom. Done. In my jurisdiction, I'd say Damien from The Omen. Minimum age for delinquency adjudication is 12, and in the first movie he's 5, so he couldn't be tried for any of his evil doings. Plus, it's not illegal to be the devil's offspring, particularly when the devil himself is a lawyer. We all know about Devil's Advocate, right? Dr. Doofenshmirtz. All of his inventions ultimately only end up stealing or damaging the creations of 2 kids, so he could probably be let out with a theft charge. Really, he's just a very lonely, unloved man trying to be seen in the world. Good thing he has his therapy platypus. In some cases, his inventions could actually benefit society. I'm pretty sure there was one episode where someone took one of his innocence and it became a machine used by eye doctors to fix eye problems. Kronk from The Emperor's New Groove. He does technically kidnap Cusco, but I think we could get his sentence way reduced. Get enough character witnesses and you're golden. I think he could charm the jury. Or just completely blow up his own case in the stand. It could be a fun surprise. Just show them the movie. Even in the scenes where he literally commits a crime, he still seems to be a good person. He just works for a terrible person and is dumb as a rock. He could be reformed by a simple change of employer. The Wicked Witch of the West. She was angry at Dorothy, but then again, Dorothy dropped a house on her sister and then grave robbed the witch's sister's body with Glinda's help. The shoes were rightfully the witch's anyway, presuming she was her sister's only heir and her sister died intestate. You could argue that all the witch wanted was for Dorothy to apologize and return the slippers she stole. Everything else that happened was the result of the witch's reasonable attempts to defend herself and her property against Dorothy's killing, theft, and trespass. It would depend on the legal status of Dorothy's companions. I'm pretty sure that you can't attempt to burn someone to death like she does to the Scarecrow, just because they're traveling with someone who stole your shoes, even if they are attempting to prevent you from harming the person carrying stolen property. But the witch didn't actually set him on fire, though. She just sent down a fireball near him. You might be able to argue tortious assault or reasonable foreseeability leading to culpability for negligence, but it doesn't appear to be intentional battery. And she could argue that she was using the tools at her disposal to persuade Dorothy to return the slippers. I want to defend the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park. The velociraptors are probably sociopaths. They were raised in an alien environment by people who had no idea how their species rears their young and probably conditioned to act in a certain way for the entertainment of tourists. I'm not surprised they turned out to be aggressive monsters. Rumpelstiltskin did nothing wrong. It would have helped if the agreement was in writing. I'm also not familiar with adoption laws. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't fly in a surrogate situation in my state either. But I know if the contract was for anything legal other than a baby, he'd have a solid case. The bears in Goldilocks. Or is Goldilocks the villain there? Breaking and entering? Theft? Yeah, Goldilocks is the villain, and it would be very hard to defend her since she was found at the scene of the crime. Many countries have laws in place allowing a person in a situation, such as being lost in the wilderness, to commit property crimes for the sake of survival. Essentially, if you're freezing and starving in the woods and come across a cabin, you can break in, get warm, and raid the kitchen. Be sure to check local laws before getting lost in the woods. They might require you to just fricking die instead. Probably Gaston, since hunting a beast that's a threat to members of your own town isn't a crime. Remember, Beast did lock up Belle's dad, and there's no reason to believe Beast couldn't go evil again during the inevitable divorce. If you mean the one I'm going to most enjoy defending, then pick the richest one. It's a criminal client. Write me a check and don't call me every damn 10 minutes from the jail, and I'm a happy camper. Also, for Gaston, the whole town was in on the angry mob. Try finding an impartial jury in that small provincial town. Smaug. He had to be considered an adverse possessor of the property after all that time, and the House of Durin did abandon the property. I think he had a right to defend his home. Although I'll admit, maybe I'm holding out for a statute of limitations on the whole burning the city thing when he first arrived. The bad guy attorney in the B movie would have killed the case if any actual lawyering occurred. He went to court against a bug and an insane woman. The whole case was kangaroo from the beginning. The funniest part of that movie is that the entire trial is watched by a jury, and then the judge just rules in favor of the plaintiff at the end. What the heck was there a jury there for? Also, two attorneys attack each other and a witness tries to kill a crossing attorney, which are both grounds for a mistrial. Well, a lot of these more cartoony ones get a lot more funny if you imagine a real lawyer sitting in the court absolutely gobsmacked about the shenanigans going on. I want to see how a real-life court reacts if a judge grossly oversteps their powers this way. Everybody's favorite, Gaston. The beast is basically kidnapping people, and you can argue that he's violent. Heck, the entire village was on Gaston's side and would acquit him. No one frames like Gaston, dodges claims like Gaston. No one's legal team shifts all the blame like Gaston. It's kind of scary how little of what went on in the Truman Show would actually be illegal in the real world. There's a few fringe cases, most notably actively preventing Truman from leaving once he realized he was in a fake world and expressed a desire to escape, but pretty much everything up to that point is very legal, and it would be hard to press charges against the director or anyone else for the basic premise of raising a child in a reality show without their knowledge. Seems like a very easy case of invasion of privacy, probably a handful of other niche torts, maybe unlawful hiring, employment practices, and failing to pay an employee wages. Very good points, and there's actually a great podcast called Ad Absurdum that goes into it in more detail. A lot of the stuff can be gotten around through a couple of things. First, the corporation in the movie is Truman's legal parent and as such can sign away most of his rights on his behalf until he's an adult. Second, it wouldn't be hard to raise Truman to not value his privacy, making it easy to get him to sign it away once he turns 18. Third, they could be paying him a salary and just putting it into an account in his name, including the fine print in his employment contract, which he signed that includes television appearances. And finally, Truman could probably take them to the cleaners in civil court, but it would be hard to stick many of the criminal charges. I think it would be fun defending Saul from Better Call Saul. Ursula, that freedom of contract all day. Ariel was a minor and she signed the contract without a parent or guardian present. I'll see you in court. What about her using henchiels to disrupt the other party to the contract? That contract was not made in good faith, since she went out of her way to personally stop Ariel from being able to fulfill it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Probably Palpatine. Republic law doesn't apply because he can bend it. Also, as Supreme Chancellor, he probably has immunity. Imperial law doesn't apply either because I assume he's untouchable there. And real-world law could also be tricky. All of his dirty work was done by his students who are conveniently dead. Good luck proving they did anything on his orders. Being a Sith Lord isn't a crime because of freedom of religion, right? His fight against the Jedi was self-defense as it was an attack against him with religious motives. Even the killing of Hago Damask would be impossible to prove as there were no witnesses and nobody even knew they were on Coruscant together. And the creation of the Empire was approved by the Senate. He didn't even abduct Maul, he was given to him. The most realistic thing would be conspiracy to destroy the Republic or something, but it sounds like a conspiracy theory to claim that there was this big Sith rule of two thing going on for centuries. And even if it got to trial somehow, if it is a jury trial, the opposition would have a very hard time. The Joker. Your Honor, my client, who is clearly suffering from schizophrenic delusions and various other mental issues, was punched in the face by a billionaire in a rubber gimp suit. And worse, the Gotham City Police Commissioner asked him to do it. I don't think you could save the Joker from legal repercussions with the insanity plea. For insanity, your client would need to either not realize what they were doing, or not be able to realize that what they were doing was considered wrong by the law. The Joker is clearly aware of what he's doing, and he's aware that it's wrong. That said, you could probably get Bruce Wayne charged for vigilantism, and you could probably get Commissioner Gordon fired for working with Batman. Scar. Yes, he murdered his brother, attempted to murder his nephew, and turned his entire family into slaves, but he's a cat. Just show some of his baby pictures to the jury, a few videos of him trying to eat Zazu, and after a few, he'd walk away as a free cat. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my client was just cat-pushing something off a ledge. The evil stepmother from Cinderella. The worst thing she did was make Cinderella work a lot, but if she's old enough to marry, then she's old enough to help out around the house. Also, women had fewer rights. There's probably not a crime she even committed against Cinderella. I'd argue that the stepmother emotionally abused her, though. It wasn't just making her work a lot, it was making her do all the work, while the stepsisters didn't have to, so neglecting one child while the others are treated better. Also, from what I remember, they destroy her dress and lock her in her room against her will. I feel like Ganondorf would be a nice pick. According to the laws of the Hylian world, he's just supposed to be doing evil stuff all the time. The curse has to be fulfilled through generations. There's always a hero, an evil person, and a goddess. Kinda like a contract, eh? A theory I like about Ganondorf is that he's as much cursed as Link and Zelda are. A perpetuous cycle of fights between good and evil just because one dude thousands of years ago was annoyed about losing against a 17-year-old. I'm not a lawyer, but Sauron. He was simply trying to get a treasure that was stolen from him while employing orcs whom the rest of the races are very racist towards. Well, clearly, this theory is ignoring the fact that he's explicitly instructing these poor disenfranchised orcs to commit property damage, murder, and holding numerous war camps without proper sanitation or obeisance of noise control ordinances. A follow-up comment makes yet another good point that opens up the possibility for a great show about Sauron's legal exploits after the Rings of Power inevitably falls through. I mean, once the Ring of Power left the borders of Mordor, he'd had to follow the rules and laws of whichever country he was attempting to reacquire the ring from. Ursula. Basic contract action. Ariel might have been a minor, but that only makes the contract voidable, not invalid. At no point did Ariel ask to void the contract. Instead, her father decided to sign his own contract. King Triton is a sophisticated party who entered into a binding contract. King Triton was the one who was willing to throw his kingdom away to bail out his favorite daughter. You also have a good estoppel argument because Ariel materially benefited from the contract, which oftentimes can supersede the voidability question with minors. Tulkinghorn from Bleak House, Old Man Potter from It's a Wonderful Life, Cruella de Vil. I would never take a case involving Dr. House or Sherlock Holmes, though. Good luck having Cruella on the stand and not having the jury turn against you. Hans from Frozen. I'm not a lawyer, but he basically wanted to legally become ruler of a kingdom through marriage. You could make a credible case that Elsa was a threat to the kingdom and that she was unfit to rule since she accidentally harmed her own sister. Hans going after her was an effort to protect the kingdom. He even stopped a henchman from shooting her in the chest, so he was clearly trying to use the least amount of violence necessary. I'm not a lawyer, but Jason Voorhees is defending himself from trespassers. Thanos, because he did nothing wrong. I knew this one was going to come up. I mean, he did kill Vision. At the very least, it's property damage. I'm not a lawyer, but Umbridge from Harry Potter because she never committed a single crime. In fact, she changed rules and laws specifically so she could do what she did. The worst action she committed was making Harry write with a quill that scarred him. However, we know from Filch that corporal punishment within schools is still allowed in the wizarding world, and the only reason it doesn't continue at Hogwarts is because Dumbledore doesn't allow it. With Dumbledore gone, the headmistress is well within her rights to bring back the practice. Ed Rooney from Ferris Bueller's Day Off. He's just trying to do his job. I would not want to defend the actor who played him, of course. Rooney was probably fine until the end of the movie when he attempted to break into the Bueller's house. Did he actually enter? Now I'm forgetting that scene. Actually, Cracked.com pointed out that because Ferris's parents called him out of school, the absence was excused no matter what the heck Ferris did with it. Ferris could have gone on the field at Wrigley and hit the game-winning home run and dedicated the win to Rooney himself and then drove to the school and handed Rooney the game ball, and Rooney could do two things: nothing and like it. Norman Bates. Could not be an easier insanity plea, and if I had to go to trial, I could just find one juror who hated his mother. Professor Pig from Batman. That dude is actually crazier than the Joker. Well, the human experimentation bit seems like it would be a bit difficult to defend. Squidward. He just wanted a calm life with a clarinet, but SpongeBob and Patrick kept annoying him, not giving a chill and calm life. Look, Sid from Toy Story is a sadistic kid, but he's a juvenile, and homicide of toys isn't a thing, so that's always helpful. The Joker, because I just play the insanity card and I'm not even a lawyer. The Joker doesn't display the kind of insanity required for that defense to work. Generally, you'd need to show that the defendant didn't know what he was doing, and if he did, didn't understand it was wrong. This would be like if you had delusions that made you think a random passerby was an evil alien coming to destroy Earth and you shot them. The Joker is clearly mentally unwell, but he doesn't seem to have this problem. As I understand the Joker, he just doesn't give a rat's butt about whether he's doing something bad. Being a psychopath or sociopath doesn't make you insane in the way to escape criminal liability. I know you want a lawyer, so this isn't like, how dare you not know this, but I think a lot of people misunderstand the insanity defense as a general rule. It's not just about being mentally ill, it has to be the right kind of insane. Kreese from Karate Kid and Cobra Kai. No defense needed since law enforcement basically doesn't exist in that universe. Agatha Harkness. What did she do that was so wrong exactly? The worst I can come up with is that she tried to stop someone with a notoriously out-of-control destructive history from continuing to mind-violate an entire town of people who were clearly traumatized by it. You're not wrong. I mean, she definitely had evil intent and was going to siphon all of that power for evil or something. I wasn't really paying attention. But yeah, if she had beaten Wanda and taken the kudos for stopping a supervillain, she probably would have been good. I'm not a lawyer, but I've got some. If King Boo hadn't gone out of his way to trap the Mario Bros, he could have pressed charges against Professor E. Gadd for imprisoning all of those ghosts into paintings and later trespassing on the mansion he magically created. Nasty Nork was wrongfully banished to a junkyard without due legal process and didn't actually attack the dragons until publicly provoked on live television, in such a way that one could try to frame it as the dragons doing it on purpose, as well as charging the dragons with harassment and neglecting due to process. GLaDOS was improperly programmed, and once the morality core was removed, no longer understood right from wrong, and thus could have a legit insanity plea, as she was programmed to only care about her experiments. Otto from Wall-E would have the same argument. HAL 9000 was acting in self-defense, as the humans on board wanted to shut him down over one single error. Frankenstein's monster was abandoned at birth and treated cruelly his whole life. Plus, he was living basically in the wild with nobody to teach him right from wrong, and thus one could convince the judge he needs psychiatric help. Also, the creature could press child neglect charges onto Victor Frankenstein. It would be hard to convict the Invisible Man, the original, not the crappy 2021, from anything because how do you even prove that he was there? And technically, he hadn't gone through with any of the crimes he wanted to commit. Most werewolves have no control over their actions either. Otto Octavius, aka Doc Ock. The neural interface affected his mind. He couldn't do much about it. It was his gallium arms that harmed people, not him. I'm not actually a lawyer, but this would be very hard to go up against, right? If you count Doofenshmirtz as a villain, then he'd be the easiest. I mean, he didn't do anything lasting. Gus Fring, because he'd absolutely have his alibis and defense plans schemed down to the most minute detail. All he would need would be an earnest and detail-oriented storyteller, and I can do that. When did you catch a customer who was totally trying to scam you? A customer said he'd never received a book, so he checked UPS, and it was shipped to a different address. So we called UPS saying, "What the frick?" And they said the customer had called them to change the shipping address and that they had a digital copy of his signature. He denied it was his signature and denied he'd ever called to change the shipping address, and that he'd never even heard of that address. He claimed that we changed the address and we were trying to screw him over. I did some investigating and found out that the new address it shipped to was a business under his name. So I called him up during his business hours, basically saying, "Aha, busted." He then called the police on me saying we were harassing him, so my boss had to talk to the cops, and the cops found out he did in fact receive the books. Good times. I used to work for a furniture company in the mid-90s. One day we got a memo that there was a former coworker who was using stolen cards to do in-store pickups or deliveries to fake addresses, like an apartment or something, but they'd pick up the furniture in the apartment lobby and claim the elevator was broken or something. The FBI was getting involved because it was in the amounts of thousands of dollars across state lines. A few days later, I got a call. A big order. The kind of order that would blow over quota and give me a bonus. Can you deliver this to New Jersey? Oh, sure. I took down the credit card info, then I asked for a callback number so I could relate the shipping info. They hesitated. I said MasterCard required it. Let me give you a Visa then. Okay. I went forward with that info and then said, oh, I forgot, Visa needs that as well. I'll call you back, they said. So I called the home office and told them I think it was those guys. The MO checked out, and they said if they call back, try to get an Amex card, and then don't ask for a callback number. Just set up a delivery. And hours later, they called back. Got my assistant, and I told her to just take the order. When it was completed, she had an Amex card order for some ungodly amount. I called the home office, and they arranged a sting with the FBI. Later, the drivers told me what had happened. They had to make a rendezvous point where they loaded a bunch of armed agents into the truck. Then, once the woman signed the bill of landing, the FBI goon squad jumped from the truck and arrested her and 4 accomplices without much resistance. Later, MasterCard, Visa, and Amex gave me reward checks for recovering stolen cards. Sweet! Oh, nice deal for you. Maybe the lesson for the potential scammer here is that you should be prepared to walk away if you even get a whiff of the patsy being onto you for something. I do wonder when this story was from and who in the heck isn't cancelling their cards as soon as they go missing, though. Working at Sears in electronics. A lady tries to return a video camera. I open the box to check the merchandise, breaking the seal. She's visibly unhappy about that and asks what I'm doing. I continue to open it. It's a camera several years old in a new box. She pretends to be surprised. Another man brings in a Casio keyboard box, proclaims that he bought it from one of my associates. We do not sell keyboards. I explain that to him. He's angry and asks where he got it from then. I say, okay, and I start to open it. He's very mad. I keep going, and he runs out of the store. It's 3 pieces of plywood. Working fast food one summer, a customer comes up and looks at my name tag, then makes some kind of rhyme out of my name. It was bad sitcom levels of acting. Anyways, he makes a small order, then asks for change for a 20. I was already on alert because of his stupid name thing, so I was paying extra attention to what he was doing. He handed me the money for the order, but kept the 20. He watched me count out the change, then pulled back and asked for it in 5s. When I had the change in my hand, I held out my other hand for the 20. He said he'd already given me the money. I just gave him a blank stare and said, no. He backtracked and was like, I'll just go get change from the gas station across the street. Right. I was in a liquor store buying a 6-pack and witnessed someone pull the I gave you a 20, not a 5 move, to which the cashier showed him the register which had no 20s in it. It's amazing how that did little to appease the person. You gotta learn when to accept defeat, buddy. I work at a grocery store. One day I was bagging up this lady's groceries. She was very pleasant, making both me and the cashier laugh about nothing. As I turned to put her groceries into the exchange cart, we do this to prevent theft, the lady quickly turns to me and says, oh, excuse me, I want them in this cart. The look she gave me was one of those, you better do this or else looks. I'm like, fine, whatever, since I'm only 16, no big deal. I go to place the first bag in the cart when it lands on the edge of an ad that's been sprawled out on the bottom, thus causing it to move a little. I see a little something underneath it, so naturally I pull back the ad. This lady has about $50 worth of meat and seafood underneath the ad. I proceed to ask her, oh ma'am, it seems like you've forgotten to put these on the belt. Do you still want them? Of course, I say this with a little snide in my voice, because even though I'm just 16, I'm not completely stupid and I know what's going on. Oh man, if looks could kill. She curtly said, I never wanted those, put them back for me. She paid for her order as she was saying this, and as she was walking past me with her cart, she gave me a nice, frick you. To this I replied in my most sarcastic voice I could muster, have a great night. She turned around and I had the biggest smile on my face as I waved goodbye. She quickly walked out the door, visibly angry. A week later, my boss promoted me, saying this event was the reason I was getting the promotion. That and some hard-working mumbo-jumbo. In short, a woman tried to steal $50 worth of meat and seafood by draping an ad over it. I stopped her and got promoted. I worked in an insurance call center, and a woman phoned up to say she'd spilt bleach on her carpet and needed to replace it. She had the right cover. It was a policy to send an inspector from a cleaning company round to make sure it was a total loss, and this woman happened to live very close to the nearest location. I told her someone would be around to inspect her carpet ASAP and that the depot was 5 minutes away, then started taking details about the accident. She was not happy with all of this, and when I asked her when it had happened, she got all flustered and eventually said, "It hasn't happened yet." Idiot! She had just admitted to insurance fraud, passed on to my boss, got back to answering calls. I always wondered what happened to her. One of my friends was a purser on a cruise ship, and the lengths people would go to get a free room upgrade were astonishing. The best story was a complaint from the passengers about a water leak in their room that had ruined some of their belongings. They wanted an upgrade to first class and announced that they'd be suing for the full replacement costs of all of their suitcases and the stuff that was in them, cameras and laptops, stuff like that. My friend dispatched maintenance right away. Water leaks on a ship are kind of a big deal, and they were at the room within a minute of receiving the complaint. And they found that the passengers had left ice all around the cabin. Because of how fast the maintenance got there, it wasn't fully melted, even in the Caribbean heat, and this was with the window left open. The purser told the passengers they would not be upgraded, would not be moved, they had to sleep in wet beds that night, and they'd be charged for the cleaning costs of the room when they reached port. 2 ladies attempted to return a Dyson without a receipt. At Target, you can't do this if an item exceeds a certain price, $100 at a time. After arguing for some time, they left because we can't do anything for them. Unfortunately, the joke was on us. The ladies didn't walk in with the Dyson. We checked out that video footage. They took it from the back and tore up the package to make it look like it had been used and whatnot. You can't do this now at Target because they have some electronic lock on it. I think it's called a spider wrap or something. 2 words. U-scan. Every day there are people who go through the U-scan with all kinds of things that they, quote, accidentally put into bags by mistake or entered via the wrong code. There's a guy who tried to buy 10 pounds of beef fillet as bananas, which were 79 cents per pound. Oh Christ, the most embarrassing thing ever was when I had a crap load of limes for a recipe I was making. When you buy most produce, it gets weighed and automatically priced by pound. So, when it asked me to input the amount, my brain had a moment of stupidity and I thought, that's weird. About 2 pounds, I guess. So I typed 2, as in 2 limes. I probably had a dozen or so. The thing starts flashing red because apparently it guessed the weight was off. Why it would ask me to input the amount if it knew the weight in the first place is beyond me. I realized my idiocy immediately and turned totally red. An employee came over and I tried to explain my thought process, but my local chain hires mentally handicapped people to provide them with employment. She had no idea what I was talking about. A huge line formed behind me watching. I felt like a complete and utter D-bag. Who steals limes? Down on their luck 1930s speakeasy owners? Although, let's be honest, the idea of one of those and a self-scanning machine ever being in contact are increasingly slim. Hope the limes didn't rot under all those withering glares. I used to work as a pharmacy technician at Walmart while I was an undergrad. Patient comes in with a script for 100 oxycodone tabs. Obviously forged because it's almost never written for amounts that large. But we called the prescribing physician just to make sure. The doctor's response was, "Frick no. They had outpatient surgery. I prescribed 10 for recovery. Let's go ahead and change that to APAP or acetaminophen, 600 milligrams. In short, a patient added a 0 to his narcotic prescription. The doctor changes it to Tylenol. Police take the patient away. I suppose I should add that it looked fairly obvious that it wasn't the same pen. At least he used the same color. Working at Domino's, a woman calls in and wants her money back. She said the 4 pizzas were burnt, which is technically possible but highly unlikely. Also, she ate the pizzas anyway. We thought she was joking, but she wasn't, and the manager refunded her order. She worked at that Domino's, it was just her night off. She was let go a couple of days later. I worked at a pizzeria in college, and the manager always threw people off when they complained because it asked for the rest of the bad pizza back, ostensibly to examine it and find out what might actually be wrong with it. There was usually very, very little of it left. Really? You ate 85% of the, quote, most disgusting pizza you've ever tasted that was, quote, completely inedible. It was so awful that you could only get 4 or 5 slices down before you had to call us? My wife had the same experience working at KFC where someone tried to return a bad 20-piece bucket with 1 piece left. I worked at a restaurant a few years ago. Another server used to keep all of her tips in a guest check holder. One day she dropped the bill on a customer's table but accidentally gave them the holder with all of her money in it. Instead of being honest, the couple who had dinner took her cash and left. And they had the stones to come back about 2 months later. The owner told them that she knew what they did and asked them to leave. Never saw them again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I worked at a local pizza shop that also did wings and subs. I had one guy order 24 wings and a foot-long sub. He came up to the counter asking if he could change the wings from barbecue to hot. I changed his stuff and took his order out. 30 minutes later, he came up and tells me he'd like to speak to the manager. I went to get the manager and she talked to him for about 10 minutes. She then brings me into the back room and asks if I made half the guy's sub cold and the other half toasted. She also asked if I cooked and only made half the wings hot and the other half plain. Turns out the guy licked off all of the sauce on the wings and then took too long to eat his other half of the sub. He wanted his meal to be free because it was made at such poor quality. A lady buys a pack of cigarettes and comes back in shortly after. Tells me that the pack has 2 cigarettes missing. Yeah, sure. And the 2 cigarettes of the same brand behind your ear got there how? Another lady came in and wanted to cash in a scratch-off lottery ticket. I scanned it once and nothing pops up. I entered the number in my machine, it says the ticket is not a winner. She rips the ticket out of my hand and tries to explain that her ticket is a winner and I'm just too dumb to run the machine. I told her I'd try it one more time. I scan it and this time I print out the "sorry, not a winner" receipt. The look on her face was one I'll never forget. I hand her the ticket and receipt and told her to call that number, the Ohio lottery number, if she wants to dispute it. This other guy came in and dropped a case of glass beer bottles on the ground. No big deal, stuff like this happens, I understand. He then takes the bottles that aren't broken and tries to pocket them. The conversation went like this. I asked, sir, what are you doing? Well, it's not like you're going to sell them or anything. Sir, look to your right. You see those bottles of beer? Where do you think they came from? So I can't have these? No, sir. Please put them back in the fridge. That's my favorite story because all I had to do was clean up and he stocked the shelves for me. I used to have a lot of brick-in-a-box experiences in retail electronics. Our stuff came sealed from the factory. You're not going to be able to break the seal, remove the product, put in something of similar weight, tape it up, and return it to us without us opening up to check that the product is actually in there. We will check, and we can tell the difference between a £20 desktop computer and a £20 cinder block. I used to work at a costume shop, and apparently for about a year before I started working there, an elderly lady had been coming into the store, buying wigs, using them, and trashing them pretty much for about a week, then returning them for a store credit and getting a new one. The owner was a big softie, so for whatever dumb reason, he'd been letting her get away with it. The first time she came in to do this scam, I was alone in the store and didn't know about this agreement, and flat out refused her and told her to come back when the owner was going to be in the store. That weekend, I went to my family reunion, and lo and behold, it turns out the scammer was my great-aunt. After talking to a few relatives, it was made clear to her that she was no longer allowed to scam the store I worked at anymore. Honestly, color me surprised that the family didn't just tell you to knuckle under and deal with it to give themselves a bit of peace from the family matriarch. Maybe she was one of the mild family elders instead of an overbearing one. I used to work in automotive service, and one day, right at closing, this young kid comes in with a piece of crap car that's knocking and smoking and literally about to die. The oil light is on, as it obviously has no oil pressure, and he asks for an oil change. I should have listened to my instincts and sent him on his way, but we went ahead and serviced the car. After, it still wouldn't pick up oil pressure and was knocking and smoking just as bad as before. We finished up and told him his engine is basically screwed and notated that same info on his receipt, then sent him on his way. The next day, we get a call from the kid's older brother that the car is broken down and we need to come check it out. I arrive where the car is, and upon seeing which car it actually is, I know immediately that a scam is brewing. Sure enough, these idiots have removed the oil drain plug and blamed us for his blown engine. I told the big brother to take a big flying F off, that I'm not stupid and I know how bad that engine was before we ever touched it. I basically told him to go ahead and sue us and we'd see them in court, and I left. Never heard another word from them. I used to work at Papa John's and we got scammers all the time. The policy was if you complain enough, we give you free pizza. One driver, John, had been working there for 5 years and had a certain latitude for dealing with customer problems. So one day a lady calls, complaining that we left a pizza cutter in the box. I don't know why this would be a major issue, but it was also a blatant lie. We had 3 cutters in the store. It didn't take advanced math to determine that she was full of BS. She yelled up a storm, trying to get free food, as the manager tried to play peacemaker until he'd had enough and handed the phone to John. He lets her rant for a bit before she finally finished on this. And I was so upset I might never order from you again. And he interrupted her. You promise? What? Do you promise? If you swear to God that you'll never contact this business again, I'll personally make you a pizza and drive it to your house right fricking now. What? Fine. John hung up the phone and went to make a pepperoni and mushroom pizza, smiling all the way. I sell used clothing on eBay for a living. It isn't much, but I earn more than I would with a full-time minimum wage job. Anyways, I sold a pair of dress pants to a gentleman living in Portland, Oregon. A week and a half later, he wanted to return the pants, stating they weren't to his satisfaction and that he wants me to refund him for the return shipping. My response? Sure, no problem. Just send them back and I'll refund you for the original sales price and original shipping, plus the return shipping once I receive them. He says, Great, I'm currently stationed in the Philippines and I'm sending them back right now. The shipping costs will be $26.95. I say, Unfortunately, I can't return your shipping costs from the Philippines since I originally shipped them to Portland. I'm more than happy to refund you the cost from Portland. I hope you understand. He obviously wasn't happy about this but sent them back anyway. Fast forward a month or so, when I opened the package, I took out the pants only to discover what looked like crap smeared all over the garment. I mean totally covered. I'm 100% positive I never sold them like that. I can only assume he took the return shipping to heart. I waited a week to contact the man about the pants. Our conversation was as follows. I received the pants back, thank you, smiley face. Did you see the pants? Seems like he wants me to blow up about the crappy return condition, but I reserved myself. I did, thank you. At this point, it had been more than 60 days since the transaction, making it too late for him to file a claim with eBay or PayPal. I never refunded him anything, just a thank you. Moral of the story? If someone intentionally does something to annoy you, never ever give them the satisfaction of knowing how it made you feel. I worked with a certain retail computer store. A customer came in with a shopping cart filled to the brim with UPS boxes that were sent from the online store of the company I work for. All in all, it's about 15 grand worth of servers and high-end computers. He wants me to return them to him for cash on the spot. Aside from the fact that the servers are both custom and not even available in retail stores, there is no way I could hand this guy 15 grand in cash and just let him walk off. I explain all of this. He needs to return them to the online store he bought them from. I don't even carry these products. And he loses his mind, screaming, like seriously screaming about what a thief I was and how much money he's wasted on my company and how he'll have my head. Me and the manager tried to calm him down, but he was freaking out. So he called security. He retreated to just beyond the border of the store and stood 10 yards away, still screaming about what a terrible person I am, personally. Security comes and escorts him away. He's banned from the store. His photo goes on the wall, the name is taken down, all of that. 1 week later, and I am crapping you the F not, the guy comes back in, with a shaved head, wearing huge aviators, quietly approaches me and requests the exact same thing. He looked like the guy from Taxi Driver at this point, so I'm marginally scared he's about to stab me or something. I go, man, we told you can't come around here anymore. I can't help you with this. He says to me, oh, that was my twin. He causes lots of problems for me like this. I'm sure we can move past it. I'm like stunned. I go to get my manager and he repeats his story again. We're pretty much stunned, so all I can say is, we just can't help you with this. I'm sorry, you have to leave. He loses it a second time, calling me a thief, threatening to come and find me later, and this time the real cops come and escort him away again. That crazy mother effer. In short, crazy D-bag shaved his head to trick me into believing he was his problem-causing twin and to get me to give him $15K in exchange for UPS boxes of product. I love the people who blatantly try to get away with crimes and have the nerve to verbally attack the people who refuse to deal with them. Surely at that point you know to cut your losses and try something else. Drawing attention to yourself is only going to get you in trouble. Years ago, I worked for a Goodwill thrift store. I was on the closing shift on register and rung up a 30-something-year-old woman. One of the items she was buying was footy pajamas. She went on and on about how warm and comfy they looked, and she couldn't wait to put them on and snuggle up with a cup of cocoa. The next morning, I'm the opening cashier. Here comes the same woman from the night before to return her entire purchase because nothing had fit. However, the items she was returning weren't the ones she bought. She was furious and denied that she had simply retagged other clothes for the return and had no idea what I was talking about. We had her previous purchase on tape as well. The manager ended up taking 3 items back that could have maybe been what she bought. Same colors. She was banned not long after that as she pulled the scam at many locations. Another goodwill trick was to make purchases and get a card stamped. 1 stamp for every $20 spent or the like, and then return the items without presenting the card. Once a card was filled, it was worth $10 of store credit. They have since discontinued that stupid promotion. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.